Welcome to the Crime for Sleep channel. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Story 1. I remember the first time I laid eyes on the Harrington estate. It was early October, the kind of autumn day where the air feels like chilled silk against your skin. The grand Victorian mansion stood at the end of a winding gravel path, its weathered facade telling stories of forgotten elegance. As the lead investigator for cold cases in our small county office, I'd seen many abandoned properties, but something about this one lingered in my consciousness like a half-remembered dream. The new owners, the Mercers, had purchased the property at auction, excited to restore it to its former glory. They'd been renovating for just under a week when they called our office. Their voices trembled over the phone line, not with fear, not exactly. More like the disquiet that comes when something ordinary suddenly reveals itself to be profoundly wrong. "There are maps," Mrs. Mercer had said, "drawn on the walls behind the old wallpaper, so many maps." I parked my car in the circular driveway, gravel crunching softly beneath the tires. The sound reminded me of footsteps, as if the property itself was approaching me rather than the other way around. The autumn breeze carried the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, nature reclaiming what was once manicured and controlled. Thomas Mercer met me at the front door, a tall man with steady hands that nonetheless couldn't seem to stop adjusting his glasses. "Detective Carroll," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. I know it must sound unusual." "Unusual is part of the job description," I replied, my notebook already in hand. I'd brought my camera too, though something told me photographs wouldn't capture whatever waited inside. The foyer of the Harrington estate was grand even in its decay. A crystal chandelier hung precariously, its once brilliant facets now dulled with decades of dust. The marble floor, cracked in places, still managed to echo our footsteps with aristocratic resonance. "It's this way," Thomas said, leading me up a mahogany staircase, in what we think was once the master bedroom. The room was spacious, with tall windows that would have once framed the estate's gardens. Now they looked out onto overgrown wilderness. The workers had stripped away most of the faded blue wallpaper, revealing the plaster beneath, and on that plaster were the maps. Intricate, detailed drawings covered nearly every inch of exposed wall. Rendered in what appeared to be charcoal or very dark ink, they depicted streets, buildings, parks. I approached slowly, the floorboards sighing beneath my weight. "This is Oakwood Avenue," I murmured, recognizing the main street of our town. The rendering was precise, architecturally accurate, and this is the courthouse. "Yes," Thomas nodded, his voice lowered as if we were in a library or church. "But look closer at this section." He directed me to a portion of wall where the map showed a residential neighborhood. I leaned in, the scent of old plaster filling my nostrils. There, drawn with the same meticulous attention to detail, was the Mercers' current home, the home they had lived in for the past 15 years. "This house wasn't built until 1998, Sarah Mercer said from the doorway, her arms wrapped around herself despite the room not being particularly cold. "The previous owner of this estate, Elias Harrington, died in 1972. I felt a slight prickling at the back of my neck. "Are you certain this is your house?" Thomas nodded. Same layout, same unusual bay window in the living room. Even the Japanese maple we planted in the front yard 10 years ago is there. I stepped back, taking in more of the map. The precision was unnerving. Street names, building dimensions, even the bench at the bus stop outside the Mercers' neighborhood was faithfully represented. "There's more," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. She crossed the room to where a section of wallpaper still clung to the wall. With gloved hands, she carefully peeled it back. Beneath was another map, this one showing the interior of what I now recognized as the Mercer's house. Each room was labeled with clinical precision. Master bedroom, Thomas's office, guest room rarely used. But there was something else. Rooms that, according to the Mercers, didn't exist in their home. A basement office, a hidden room behind the pantry, a narrow staircase leading to an attic space that their house plans didn't include. "We've lived there for 15 years, Thomas said, his academic composure beginning to fray. "We would know if these rooms existed." I took photographs, the camera's flash momentarily brightening the dim room. The maps seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. "Did the previous owners leave any records, journals, letters?" I asked, my pen hovering over my notebook. Sarah shook her head. "The estate's been empty for decades. Elias Harrington had no heirs. Everything went to the state, then to auction." I made a note to check county records. "And you've never met anyone named Harrington before? No connection to the family?" They both confirmed they hadn't, their eyes continually drawn back to the maps as if magnetized. As we talked, I noticed something that made my skin tight. In one corner of the room, partially hidden by a dusty armoire, was another map. This one showed the very room we were standing in. And there, rendered in the same precise strokes, were 3 figures, standing exactly where we were standing now. I approached the drawing slowly, as if it might somehow change or disappear if observed too directly. The figures were detailed enough to be recognizable. A tall man with glasses, a woman with her arms crossed, and a third figure holding what appeared to be a notebook. "When did you first uncover this section?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. We didn't," Thomas replied. "The workers only removed wallpaper from the other walls. That corner still has the original covering." Yet there it was, a map of the present moment, drawn decades ago. In the days that followed, we discovered more. County records showed that Elias Harrington had been a cartographer by trade, but had abandoned his profession after returning from the Second World War. He became reclusive, rarely leaving the estate. Neighbors reported seeing lights in his bedroom at all hours, and the occasional delivery of large quantities of ink and paper. The Mercers, understandably unsettled, had contractors remove all the wallpaper. The maps covered every wall of the master bedroom, streets that didn't exist when Harrington was alive, buildings that weren't constructed until decades after his death, and most disturbingly, interiors of homes belonging to people who had no connection to him. Including one final map found behind the bedroom door, a detailed rendering of my own apartment, with a drawer in my desk slightly open, revealing a case file I had brought home just last week. The Mercers sold the property shortly after. The new owners, unaware of its strange history, demolished the structure to build a modern home. The maps were destroyed, their impossible knowledge reduced to rubble and dust. But sometimes, late at night, I find myself staring at my apartment walls, wondering what secrets they might hold behind their painted surfaces. And occasionally, when the night is particularly still, I imagine I hear the soft scratch of charcoal on plaster, mapping moments that haven't yet come to pass. The Harrington case remains officially unsolved. I keep the photographs in a locked drawer, though I rarely look at them now. Some mysteries I've come to believe are like those maps. They extend beyond the boundaries we've drawn around what we think is possible. And some spaces in our understanding, like those rooms in the Mercer's house, might exist without our knowledge, hidden passages in reality that only certain eyes can see. Story 2, I remember the quiet that settled over Millfield that autumn, a peculiar stillness that seemed to hover between the falling leaves and empty sidewalks. The kind of quiet that makes you listen more carefully, that makes you notice things you'd otherwise miss. It was during this silence that I first heard about Rachel Winters and the stranger who knew too much. The case file landed on my desk on a Tuesday morning, a thin manila folder, unremarkable except for the single word written across the tab, visitor. Inside was a statement, handwritten in a hurried script that slanted sharply to the right, as if the writer couldn't get the words down fast enough. I can still feel the weight of that paper between my fingers, the slight texture of the cheap department-issued notepaper. The overhead fluorescent light in my office hummed softly, casting a pale glow that made the ink appear faded before its time. Rachel Winters, 34, kindergarten teacher at Millfield Elementary, lives alone in a small craftsman on Oakwood Drive. No criminal record, no history of mental illness, no known enemies. I read her statement 3 times before reaching for my phone. Ms. Winters, Detective Harmon from Millfield PD, I'd like to discuss your report. Her voice was measured when she answered, controlled in a way that suggested she was working hard to keep it that way. I've been waiting for your call. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, Neutral Ground. When I arrived, she was already seated in a corner booth, a steaming mug clutched between her hands, though she wasn't drinking from it, just holding it as if drawing comfort from its warmth. Rachel had the kind of face that wouldn't stand out in a crowd, pleasant, unremarkable features framed by shoulder-length brown hair. But her eyes gave her away, darting occasionally to the door, to the windows, checking and rechecking every new customer who entered. Thank you for meeting me, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. The vinyl seat creaked softly beneath my weight. Can you tell me again, in your own words, what happened at Wilson's grocery last Thursday? She took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around her mug. I was in the produce section selecting apples. Her voice was quiet, forcing me to lean in slightly. Granny Smith. I always buy Granny Smith on Thursdays. My mother used to make apple pie every Friday when I was a child, and I've kept the tradition. A tiny detail, seemingly irrelevant, but I wrote it down anyway. In my experience, it's often these small patterns of everyday life that hold the key. He approached from behind me. I didn't hear him coming, just suddenly felt someone standing there. When I turned around, he smiled like we were old friends. Can you describe him? I asked. Average height, clean-shaven, brown hair neatly combed. Wearing a blue button-down shirt and khakis, he looked ordinary, like someone's accountant or maybe a high school teacher. And you're certain you'd never seen him before? She shook her head slowly. I thought that at first, that maybe he was a parent of one of my students, but then he started talking. The ceiling fan above us rotated lazily, creating a soft, rhythmic whoosh that underscored her words. A barista called out an order in the background. Outside, a car honked once, the sound muffled through the glass. He said, "Rachel, it's so good to run into you. How's your sister doing in Phoenix? Still having trouble with that leaky roof?" And then he laughed and said, "I bet you still sleep with your bedroom window cracked open, even in winter. Old habits die hard." I felt a slight chill despite the coffee shop's warmth. Your sister lives in Phoenix. Yes, and her roof was damaged in a storm last month, and I do sleep with my window cracked open. Always have since I was a child. She paused, wrapping her hands more tightly around her mug. But I never post about those things online. I barely use social media, and I've never mentioned my sleeping habits to anyone in town. What happened next? I asked him who he was. I remember feeling, not scared yet, just confused. He smiled, this bland, pleasant smile, and said, "You know me, Rachel. I know all about the scar on your right knee from when you fell off your bike at 10. I know about the dream you have, the recurring one where you're trying to scream but can't. I know you sing to yourself when you think no one can hear." She stopped speaking, her gaze dropping to her untouched coffee. "And what did you say?" I prompted gently. I asked him again who he was, how he knew these things. That's when he leaned in close, too close, and whispered, "I've been living with you all along." The air in the coffee shop suddenly felt thicker, harder to breathe. In the corner, a group of college students laughed at something, the sound jarring against Rachel's quiet fear. "Did he threaten you directly?" "No, that's what makes it so. I don't even know the word." He just smiled again, patted my arm like we were old friends, and walked away. Said he'd see me at home. I've investigated many stalking cases over my 15 years with the department. Usually there's some connection, an ex-partner, a rejected suitor, a disgruntled colleague. But Rachel couldn't identify any link to this man. According to her, he was a complete stranger. We increased patrols past her house, installed a security system, checked for signs of forced entry or surveillance equipment. Nothing. For 3 weeks there was no further contact. Then one evening, Rachel received a handwritten letter in her mailbox. No stamp, no postmark, just her name written in neat block letters. The paper crinkled softly between my fingers as I unfolded it in my office the next morning. The room was quiet except for the gentle patter of rain against the window, creating a strange, intimate atmosphere as I read. "Dear Rachel, did you know you talk in your sleep? Last night you mentioned someone named Michael. Who is he? I don't like sharing you. The blue sweater you wore yesterday brings out your eyes. You should wear it more often. I'll be watching." We found no fingerprints on the letter, no DNA on the envelope. The only cameras near her house were too distant to capture the mailbox clearly. Rachel began staying with a friend. We installed more cameras, higher quality this time. Officers drove by regularly, still nothing. Then came the phone call. "He was here," Rachel's voice trembled over the line, "in my bedroom." I drove through the rain-slicked streets, windshield wipers creating a hypnotic rhythm as I raced to her house. By the time I arrived, 2 patrol officers were already there, standing awkwardly in her living room while Rachel sat rigid on her couch. "Show me," I said. She led me to her bedroom. Nothing seemed disturbed at first glance, bed made, closet closed, curtains drawn, but then she pointed to her pillow. Resting in the center was a single Granny Smith apple, polished to a perfect shine. "It wasn't here when I left this morning," she whispered, "and I've been staying at Jen's place for the past 3 nights." I had the apple bagged for evidence, knowing already we'd find nothing. The security system showed no signs of entry, no alarms triggered, no doors or windows opened. Days stretched into weeks. Rachel moved 3 times. The letters continued to find her. Small items disappeared from her home, a hairbrush, a coffee mug, a childhood photograph. Other items appeared, flowers on her kitchen table, a book open to specific passages on her nightstand, once a still warm cup of tea. We set traps, surveillance, had officers stay in her home. Nothing. It was as if her visitor could walk through walls, could predict our every move. One evening I sat in my office reviewing the case file again, the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking time that seemed to be running out. Outside my window, the streetlights flickered on one by one as dusk settled over Millfield. My phone rang, piercing the silence. Detective Harmon, Rachel's voice was different, calm in a way that immediately set me on edge. I figured it out. Figured what out? I asked, already reaching for my keys. Who he is, how he knows. There was an odd note in her voice, almost wonder. He's been here all along, just like he said. Rachel, where are you? I was standing now, phone pressed to my ear. Home, my real home on Oakwood. Stay there, don't move, I'm on my way. The drive to Oakwood Drive took 12 minutes. 12 minutes of growing dread, of rain starting to fall again, tapping against my windshield like impatient fingers. Her front door was unlocked. The house was dark except for a single lamp in the living room, casting a warm circle of light. Rachel sat on the couch, hands folded in her lap, staring at something on the coffee table in front of her. Rachel, I approached cautiously, one hand near my weapon. She looked up, her expression serene. It was me all along, detective. On the table lay an open journal, pages filled with handwriting. Next to it, a stack of letters, the same letters that had been left for Rachel over the past months. I don't understand, I said, though a cold realization was already forming. I have gaps, she said simply, times when I'm not me. I've always had them since I was a child, hours, sometimes days that I can't account for. My doctor called it dissociative identity disorder, but the medication made me feel wrong, so I stopped taking it years ago. She gestured to the journal. I've been writing to myself, warning myself, the visitor isn't some stranger. He's a part of me, a part that knows everything about me because he is me. I stood frozen, the pieces rearranging themselves in my mind. The security system that never registered an intruder, the intimate knowledge of her life, the ability to find her no matter where she moved. I installed cameras, she continued, her voice distant. Not the ones you put up, my own, hidden ones. I watched the footage last night. She pointed to a laptop on the side table. I watched myself place the apple on my pillow. I watched myself write the letters. I've been living with a visitor who was never visiting at all. The rain had intensified, drumming against the roof. In the dim light, Rachel's face seemed to shift slightly, subtle changes in her expression coming and going like shadows. Are you Rachel right now? I asked carefully. She smiled, a different smile than I'd seen before, confident, almost playful. Sometimes, she said, but not always. I never closed the case officially. In my report, I wrote that the stalker had never been identified, that the victim had relocated to another state. In a way, that was true. Rachel did move away to a specialized treatment facility where she could get the help she needed. Sometimes I drive past her empty house on Oakwood Drive. In the gathering dusk, with shadows pooling on the porch, I can almost imagine someone watching from behind the curtains, a visitor who was there all along, hiding in plain sight. I keep her journal in my desk drawer. On quiet nights when the office is empty and the only sound is the gentle hum of the fluorescent lights, I find myself reading it again, wondering about the strangers we carry within ourselves and how well we ever truly know our own minds. The most haunting mysteries I've learned aren't always about who might be watching us. Sometimes they're about who might be watching from within. Story 3. I remember the first time I walked into the Farley house on Midlothian Drive. The autumn light filtered through dust-speckled windows, casting long shadows across hardwood floors that creaked beneath my feet with each careful step. As a detective with 20 years on the force, I developed what some might call a sixth sense, an ability to feel when something wasn't quite right. The Farley house felt discordant, not immediately threatening, but like an instrument slightly out of tune. Previous owners moved out after just 4 months, Officer Reynolds murmured beside me, his voice barely disturbing the heavy silence. The new family, the Clarks, have been here 7 weeks, started hearing things 3 weeks ago. I nodded slowly, letting my fingers trail along the wallpaper in the hallway, a faded floral pattern, slightly discolored in patches where pictures once hung. The house was a modest 3-bedroom craftsman, built in the 1940s, the kind that real estate agents enthusiastically describe as having good bones and character. The Clarks had gotten it for a steal, which should have been their first warning. "Show me the room," I said. Reynolds led me up narrow stairs that announced each footfall with a soft groan. The second floor was cooler than the first, as if reluctant to accept the gentle warmth of the October sun. 3 doors lined a short hallway, master bedroom on the left, bathroom straight ahead, and to the right the smallest bedroom. This was the one. This was where the voices spoke. "Mrs. Clark says it starts around 11:15 each night," Reynolds explained, standing at the threshold as if unwilling to step inside. "Lasts anywhere from 10 minutes to nearly an hour." The room itself was unremarkable, perhaps 10 by 12 feet, pale blue walls, a small window overlooking the backyard. The Clarks had been using it as a home office. A desk sat in one corner, a bookshelf against the far wall, nothing that suggested anything sinister. I moved to the center of the room and closed my eyes, trying to feel what a family might feel here late at night, when shadows deepen and the mind becomes more susceptible to suggestion. The house settled around me with small pops and creaks, normal sounds for an aging structure, yet somehow deliberate in their rhythm. "What exactly do they hear?" I asked, eyes still closed. "Conversations," Reynolds said, muffled at first, like hearing neighbors through a wall, but then he hesitated, consulting his notepad. "Mrs. Clark says the voices began using their names, discussing things about their day that no one else would know." I opened my eyes and studied the walls more carefully. Recently painted, but not professionally, I could see the amateur brush strokes, small drips that had dried unnoticed in corners. "Did they record any of these episodes?" Reynolds nodded. "On their phone. Quality isn't great, but you can hear it clearly enough. Here." He handed me his department-issued tablet, a recording already queued up. I pressed play and held it close to my ear. At first, nothing but the ambient sounds of a house at night. Then, gradually, voices emerged from the static, indistinct at first, but growing clearer. A man and a woman, their conversation mundane yet unnervingly intimate. "Emma left her science project until the last minute again. Daniel said the mortgage payment cleared. Should check on that leak in the guest bathroom before it gets worse." The voices were distant but unmistakable. I felt the small hairs on my arms rise. Emma was the Clarks' 12-year-old daughter. Daniel was Mr. Clark. The leak in the guest bathroom was something Mr. Clark had mentioned to his wife just that morning. Has anyone lived here between the previous owners and the Clarks? I asked. Number House was empty for nearly 8 months. I nodded slowly, moving toward the walls, running my fingertips along the surface. Something about the paint job bothered me. In certain places, it seemed thicker, applied more heavily. Get me a stud finder and a utility knife, I said. While Reynolds went to fetch the tools from my car, I continued my examination, pressing my ear against different sections of the wall. In the northwest corner, the drywall sounded different, more hollow, somehow. When Reynolds returned, I marked a small section and carefully cut into the wall. The blade met resistance, then broke through. Behind the fresh drywall was another layer, and sandwiched between them something unexpected: foam acoustic panels, the kind used in recording studios. Help me open this up more, I instructed. Together we cut a larger section, revealing an elaborate setup hidden within the walls: miniature microphones, speakers, and a small digital recording device. The technology was sophisticated but not military grade, easily available to civilians with the right knowledge and motivation. My God, Reynolds whispered, what is all this? I extracted the digital recorder carefully, preserving any fingerprints that might remain. Someone's been listening, I said quietly, and not just listening, recording, splicing, and playing back. The revelation unfolded gradually over the following days. Forensic analysis revealed the fingerprints of Martin Weiss, a previous owner who had sold the house to the family before the Clarks. Further investigation uncovered that Weiss had been an audio engineer before being laid off 2 years earlier. He had installed the elaborate system during renovations, creating what amounted to an audio surveillance network throughout the house. The voices the Clarks heard were, horrifyingly their own, snippets of conversations recorded during the day, digitally processed, and played back at night through speakers hidden in the walls. The system was programmed to activate remotely, allowing Weiss to control it from his new apartment less than a mile away. But why? The question lingered as we tracked down Weiss to a small, cluttered apartment filled with audio equipment. He offered no resistance when we arrested him, seeming almost relieved to be discovered. In the interrogation room, under the steady hum of fluorescent lights, Weiss finally explained his unsettling project. I needed to feel connected, he said, his voice soft and precise. After the divorce, after losing my job, I put everything into that house. When I had to sell it, I couldn't just let go. He described how he would listen to the families living in what he still considered his house, inserting himself into their lives through careful manipulation of their own words. I wasn't trying to scare them, he insisted. I just wanted to be part of something again. The case was closed with Weiss pleading guilty to invasion of privacy and harassment charges. The Clarks had the entire house swept for devices and the walls repaired. They chose to stay, determined not to let fear drive them from their home. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm reviewing case files in my quiet apartment, I think about that room, that ordinary space transformed into something insidious through technology and loneliness. I think about how vulnerable we all are in our private moments, how the walls around us may not be as solid as they appear. And occasionally, when my own apartment settles in the night, I find myself listening more carefully to the creaks and whispers, wondering if they're truly just the sounds of an aging building, or if someone, somewhere, is listening back. Story 4. I first heard about the Barlow case on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, when the light turns golden early and shadows stretch long across small town streets. The air had that particular crispness that makes sound travel farther, clearer. Maybe that's why Sheriff Owen's voice seemed to hang in his office long after he'd stopped speaking, describing the strange circumstances surrounding Alina Barlow's disappearance. "The painting changed," he said, tapping his weathered finger on the case file. "That's what the housekeeper kept insisting. Said she noticed it the day after Mrs. Barlow went missing." I nodded slowly, letting the information settle between us like dust in sunlight. The ceiling fan above turned lazily, cutting through shafts of afternoon light. I'd been called in as a consultant, something that happens occasionally when local departments face cases with unusual elements. This qualified. Alina Barlow, 67, widow of a prominent local judge, lived alone in a Victorian home on the outskirts of Millfield. According to the file, she was last seen by her housekeeper, Martha Gaines, on a Friday afternoon. By Monday, when Martha returned to work, Alina was gone. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. Just an empty house, Alina's reading glasses on the side table next to a half-finished cup of tea, and a painting that Martha swore had changed. "What kind of painting are we talking about?" I asked, my voice deliberately measured. In these initial conversations, I find it helps to establish a rhythm, to let the facts emerge at their own pace. Sheriff Owens slid a photograph across his desk. It showed a landscape, a serene lake surrounded by tall pines, mountains rising in the background, dawn light spilling across the water's surface. "It's been in the Barlow family for generations," he explained, the leather of his chair creaking as he leaned back. "Painted by some European artist back in the 1880s. According to Martha, there was suddenly a figure in it, a man standing at the water's edge. She said she dusted that painting every Monday for 15 years and never seen any figure there before." I studied the photograph. Indeed, there was a small, dark silhouette of a man at the lake's edge, his back to the viewer. "Could she be mistaken? Memory is a tricky thing." The sheriff shook his head slowly. "Martha's not the imaginative type. Plus, she took a photo of the painting on her phone a month earlier to show her niece who's studying art history. No figure in that one." He slid another photograph across the desk. The same painting, but empty of human presence. The next morning found me driving down Millfield's maple-lined streets toward the Barlow residence. The Victorian house stood apart from its neighbors, set back behind an iron gate that creaked softly as I pushed it open. The air smelled of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Martha Gaines met me at the door, a small woman with practical hands and eyes that missed nothing. "It's still changing," she said without preamble, leading me through the high-ceilinged foyer. Her shoes made soft tapping sounds against the hardwood. "The man in the painting, he's closer now." The painting hung above the fireplace in the study, a room lined with leather-bound books and furnished with antiques that gleamed with polish. Morning light filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns across the oriental rug. I approached the painting slowly, aware of the slight creak of floorboards beneath my feet. The landscape was beautiful, masterfully rendered with oil paints that captured the transparency of morning mist hovering above the lake. And there, no longer at the water's edge, but now on a path leading toward the foreground, was the figure of a man, small but distinct. His features were indistinguishable, but his posture suggested purpose, movement. "When did you first notice him moving?" I asked, my voice sounding oddly hushed in the quiet room. Martha stood a few feet behind me, arms crossed. "Yesterday morning. I come by every day now, checking on the house until they find Mrs. Barlow." She paused, then added, "The police think I'm crazy." "I don't think you're crazy," I said, taking out my camera to document the painting. "I think you're observant." Over the next 3 days, I immersed myself in Alina Barlow's life. I sat in her study, reviewing financial records that showed no irregularities. I spoke with her attorney, who confirmed that her will had remained unchanged for years. I interviewed neighbors who described her as private but pleasant, often seen tending to her garden or walking to the small bookshop downtown. No one had enemies, that's what people always say. But Alina Barlow genuinely seemed to have lived a quiet, unobtrusive life following her husband's death 12 years earlier. There were no obvious motives for anyone to wish her harm. Each morning I returned to the house to check the painting. Each morning the figure had moved closer. By Friday he had reached the foreground path, now clearly a man in early 20th century clothing, a dark suit and hat that shadowed his face. On Saturday morning I arrived at the Barlow house just as dawn was breaking. A light rain fell, beating on my coat as I hurried up the front walk. Martha met me at the door, her face pale. "He's at the front of the painting now," she whispered, "and I found something." She led me not to the study, but up the curving staircase to a small room at the back of the house. It appeared to be a storage space, filled with old trunks and furniture draped in sheets. Martha pulled a chain, illuminating the room with a single bare bulb. "I was looking for Mrs. Barlow's photo albums, thought they might help somehow," she explained, kneeling beside an open trunk. "Found these instead." She handed me a stack of yellowed newspaper clippings and what appeared to be journal pages. I sat on an old steamer trunk, the dust motes dancing in the air around me as I began to read. The journals belonged to Alina's father-in-law, Arthur Barlow. The entries dated back to 1947 and detailed his acquisition of the painting from a German art dealer who had fled Europe after the war. The dealer had claimed the painting was special, that it had belonged to a renowned Austrian family before being confiscated during the Nazi regime. "The painting shows you what you need to see," one entry read. "Heinrich warned me never to sell it, never to let it leave the family. Said his grandfather painted it with more than just oils and pigments. Said there was old magic in it." I read on, the rain tapping gently against the windows, creating a soothing rhythm that contrasted with the increasingly disturbing content of the journal. Arthur described watching the painting change subtly over years, colors shifting with seasons, small animals appearing and disappearing. And once, when his business partner had threatened to expose some financial impropriety, a figure had appeared in the painting. A figure that grew closer each day until, on the 7th day, his partner was found dead of an apparent heart attack. "The figure vanished after Thomas died," Arthur wrote. "The painting returned to its original state. I should destroy it, but I cannot bring myself to do so. Instead, I will keep it, watch it, ensure it never leaves our family." The final clipping was an obituary for Heinrich Mayer, the German art dealer. He had died in 1952, alone in his apartment. The article mentioned that he had been found sitting in a chair, facing a blank wall where a painting had once hung, the hooks and wire still in place, but the artwork missing. That evening I sat in Alina's study, watching the painting as shadows lengthened across the room. The figure was now so close to the foreground that his features were almost discernible, almost, but not quite. Something about the brushwork kept his face perpetually in shadow, regardless of how I adjusted the lighting. A soft sound made me turn. Martha stood in the doorway, a cup of tea in her hands. "Thought you might want this," she said, placing it on the desk beside me. "Thank you," I gestured to the chair opposite. Martha, did Alina ever mention anything unusual about the painting? She settled into the chair, smoothing her skirt, not directly, but sometimes I'd catch her talking to it, especially after her stroke last year. She'd sit right where you are now, having conversations like there was someone else in the room. Did you ever hear what she said? Martha was quiet for a moment, her eyes on the painting. Once, I was dusting in the hallway and I heard her say, "You can have me when it's time, but only when it's time." I thought she was on the phone. The implications hung in the air between us, unspoken but understood. I thanked Martha and sent her home, promising to lock up. When she was gone, I turned back to the painting, studying it in the fading light. "What did you do to Alina?" I asked aloud, feeling slightly foolish but compelled nonetheless. The house answered with the ordinary sounds of an old structure settling, the subtle creaks and sighs that seem amplified in the quiet hours. I continued my vigil as darkness fell completely, turning on only the small desk lamp that cast a warm circle of light in the otherwise shadowed room. I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes, moonlight was streaming through the windows. I sat up slowly, my neck stiff from the awkward position. My eyes went immediately to the painting. The figure was gone. In its place at the very front of the scene was a door, a simple wooden door that seemed to stand alone at the edge of the painted world, opening onto the lake and mountains beyond. A sound behind me, the soft shuffle of slippered feet on hardwood, made me turn. Alina Barlow stood in the doorway of her study. She was thin, frailer than in the photographs I'd seen, dressed in a nightgown and robe. Her silver hair was neatly combed, her posture perfect despite her evident age. "You've been looking for me," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I managed to reply, standing slowly. "Are you all right, Mrs. Barlow?" She smiled, a gentle expression that softened the lines of her face. "I'm quite well, better than I've been in some time, actually." She moved into the room with measured steps. "I see you've been studying Arthur's painting." "It's unusual." "Yes," she agreed, her eyes moving to the artwork. "It's been in the family for generations. It shows you things, important things." She paused by the fireplace, lifting a hand toward the painting but not quite touching it. Heinrich said it was a doorway of sorts, a passage between what is and what could be. "Martha has been worried about you," I said, watching her carefully. "Everyone has." Alina nodded. "Dear Martha, so loyal, I should have explained, but I wasn't sure myself until recently." She turned to me fully now. "The painting has been showing me the door for months now, ever since my doctor told me about the aneurysm. Inoperable, he said, could rupture any time." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "Mrs. Barlow." "I'm ready now," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "I've made all my arrangements. My affairs are in order." She smiled again, looking back at the painting. "And he's shown me the way." "Who has?" I asked, though I feared I knew the answer. "Arthur, my father-in-law." Her voice was calm, certain. "He went through the door 5 years after his wife passed, said he'd wait for me on the other side." I took a step toward her, not sure what I intended to do. Alina raised a hand, stopping me. "I'm not confused, detective. I'm not suffering from dementia or delusions. The painting has always known when it's time. For generations, it's given Barlows a choice to go quietly on our own terms." As I watched, she moved to stand directly before the painting. In the moonlight, the colors seemed to shift, the door becoming more substantial, more real. "What will happen when you're gone?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Will there be a body? Should I tell them where to look?" Alina turned her head slightly, her profile silvered by moonlight. "No body, no evidence, just absence. It's always been the Barlow way." She paused, then added, "The painting will reset, return to its original state, until the next time it's needed." I wanted to stop her, tell her that what she was describing was impossible. But in that moment, watching her stand before that painted door with absolute certainty, I couldn't form the words. "Goodbye, detective," Alina said softly. "Thank you for your concern, but it was unnecessary. I'm simply going home." She reached forward, her hand meeting the canvas and continuing through, as if the painting had dissolved into mist. I stood frozen, watching as Alina Barlow stepped fully into the painting, the door seeming to open wider to receive her. Then, like a reflection on disturbed water, the image rippled slightly. When it stilled, the painting showed only what it had always shown, a serene landscape, a lake surrounded by pines, mountains in the distance, dawn light spilling across the water's surface. No figure, no door, nothing to suggest it had ever been anything but oil on canvas. I never filed a final report on the Barlow case. How could I explain what I'd witnessed? Instead, I told Sheriff Owens that Alina must have planned her disappearance carefully, that she likely had personal reasons we would never fully understand. The case remains officially unsolved. Alina's estate passed to distant relatives who sold the house and most of its contents, all except the painting, which mysteriously vanished before the estate sale. Sometimes on quiet October evenings when the light turns golden early and shadows stretch long across small-town streets, I find myself wondering about that painting, where it is now, whose walls it graces, and whether someday a figure might appear at the water's edge, gradually moving closer, bringing with it an invitation or a warning. Some doors once seen can never be unseen, even when they disappear from view. Story 5. They found the letters sealed behind the old plaster walls, hundreds of them, written in shaky handwriting, each one addressed to them by name. But the most disturbing part, the letters described events that hadn't happened yet. I remember the first time I walked into the Winters' home on Oakwood Lane. The floorboards whispered beneath my feet, a gentle creak that seemed to follow me from room to room. The air inside was different, heavier somehow, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Detective work is often about feeling the wrong notes in a melody, and this old Victorian was playing a strange tune. It was late September when the call came in. A renovation crew had been tearing down a wall in the master bedroom when they discovered a cavity filled with yellowed envelopes. The foreman, a practical man named Douglas with calloused hands and 20 years of construction experience, had never seen anything like it. "I've found all sorts of things in old houses," he told me, his voice low and measured in the kitchen that smelled of fresh coffee and ancient dust. "Forgotten toys, old photographs, even cash once or twice, but never letters addressed to people who just moved in." The Winters family, Sarah, Michael, and their 2 children, Emma and Noah, had purchased the house only 3 months prior. The previous owner, Alina Blackwood, had passed away at the age of 94 after living in the home for nearly 7 decades. According to neighbors, she had been a recluse in her later years, rarely leaving the property. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the warmth spread through my fingers as I examined one of the letters. The envelope was addressed to Sarah Winters, the handwriting delicate yet unsteady. Inside, the letter described in unsettling detail the renovation plans the family had only discussed privately. It mentioned the exact shade of blue Sarah had chosen for Emma's bedroom, a decision made just last week, a color she hadn't shared with anyone outside the family. "I thought it was some kind of prank at first," Sarah whispered, her fingers tracing the edge of the letter. Her eyes didn't meet mine. "But then I read the part about Noah's nightmares. How could anyone know about those? He only started having them after we moved in." The letters weren't just addressed to Sarah. There were dozens for Michael, describing his recent promotion, the long hours at the office, even the argument he and Sarah had last Tuesday night when they thought the children were asleep. There were letters for Emma, mentioning her new school friends by name, and for Noah, referencing the secret fort he'd built in the backyard behind the old maple tree. I carefully placed the letters in evidence bags, the paper rustling softly like autumn leaves. This wasn't a typical case of harassment or stalking. These letters had been sealed inside that wall for years, perhaps decades, judging by the degradation of the envelopes and the faded ink. As I drove back to the station, the setting sun casting long shadows across the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something obvious. The radio played softly a jazz piece that seemed to mirror my scattered thoughts, notes that didn't quite resolve into a recognizable pattern. The forensics team worked methodically, their findings arriving in my inbox over the next few days. The paper was indeed old, dating back at least 30 years. The ink matched a brand commonly available in the 1980s. Most importantly, handwriting analysis confirmed what I had suspected. The letters were written by Alina Blackwood herself. But how could Alina have known about the Winters family decades before they moved in? How could she describe events that hadn't yet occurred? I found myself returning to the house on Oakwood Lane, drawn back like a moth to flame, searching for something I couldn't name. The basement yielded the first real clue. Behind an old bookshelf, we discovered Alina's journals, dozens of them, dating back to 1953. I spent hours in that dim room, the single bulb casting shadows that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. The air was cool and damp, with the faint smell of mildew and something else, something like ozone. Alina's early entries were mundane gardening notes, recipes, observations about neighbors long since departed. But in 1962, the entries changed. She began writing about dreams, vivid and detailed, dreams about families living in her home, people she'd never met but described with startling specificity. With each passing year, her descriptions became more detailed, more certain. "The woman with copper hair will paint the dining room green," she wrote in 1965. "The man with the scar on his left hand will repair the porch steps poorly." These predictions matched renovations documented in the home's history, families who had lived there between Alina's time and the Winters. I tracked down previous residents, my voice calm and measured during phone calls that often stretched late into the night. Each conversation adding another piece to this impossible puzzle. A family named Cooper had indeed painted the dining room green in 1968. Martin Davis, who owned the house in the early 1970s, had a distinctive scar on his left hand from a childhood accident, and his hasty porch repair had needed to be redone by the next owners. One night, as I sat in my office surrounded by Alina's journals and case notes, the overhead light buzzing softly, I noticed a pattern. The dreams, the predictions, they intensified during periods of renovation. Any time the physical structure of the house changed, Alina's visions became more frequent, more detailed. The following morning I returned to the house, the early fog clinging to the ground like reluctant ghosts. Sarah Winters met me at the door, dark circles under her eyes suggesting another sleepless night. "Have you found anything?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she led me into the kitchen. The children were at school and Michael was at work. The house felt different when empty, listening somehow. "I have a theory," I said, placing Aliner's journal from 1983 on the kitchen table. "I believe Aliner had some kind of connection to this house that science can't easily explain. The more I've investigated, the more convinced I am that she somehow saw through time." Sarah didn't laugh or dismiss me. Instead, she pushed her own journal across the table. "I've been having dreams," she admitted, "about a young woman living here in the 1950s. In my dreams, I watch her writing letters and sealing them inside the walls. She looks right at me sometimes, like she can see me watching her." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the autumn air filtering through the window. We were standing in the same spot where Aliner had stood decades ago, having the very conversation she had predicted in a letter found in the wall. The house renovation continued, albeit more cautiously now. Each new wall opened revealed more letters, more predictions. Some were addressed to people who hadn't yet moved into the house's future residents beyond even the Winters family. As I compiled my final report, I knew it would never be filed officially. Some cases don't fit neatly into the categories our system recognizes. The typewriter keys clicked softly as I documented the facts as I found them, knowing my supervisor would read it with skeptical eyes. The house on Oakwood Lane still stands, still whispers its secrets to those who listen carefully. The Winters family chose to stay, developing an unusual relationship with their home and its former owner. They've taken to leaving their own notes in the walls during renovations, messages to future residents, continuing the strange correspondence that Aliner began. Sometimes I drive by the house late at night when the windows glow with warm light and shadows move behind curtains. I wonder what Sarah dreams about now, what future occupants she glimpses, what messages she leaves for them. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I wonder if Aliner Blackwood ever saw me in her dreams, a detective trying to understand a mystery that defies explanation, sitting in her kitchen decades after her death, feeling the weight of letters not yet written, addressed to people not yet born. The true crime, perhaps, is that some mysteries are never meant to be solved, only experienced, documented, and passed on like the letters in the walls of the house that wrote to strangers across time. Story 6, The Winter in Oakwood Hills, was particularly harsh that year. I remember the gentle hush of snowfall against my office window as I reviewed the case files. The soft yellow light of my desk lamp cast long shadows across photographs that shouldn't have existed because, according to all logical evidence, the man in them couldn't have been real. It began on December 12th when Aliner Chambers, a 42-year-old librarian, called the station. Her voice was steady but carried an undercurrent of confusion that made me reach for my recorder. I can still hear the subtle tremble in her words as she explained what had happened the previous evening. "He knocked on my door around 6, she said. "I wasn't expecting anyone. The snow had been falling steadily since noon." I closed my eyes, letting her voice transport me back to that moment. Aliner's home sat at the end of Willow Street, a modest 2-story house with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, the kind of place where nothing extraordinary ever happened. "He was well dressed," she continued. "Charcoal coat, pressed slacks. His smile was warm, disarming. He introduced himself as David Cooper, said he'd just moved into the Petersons' old place down the street." The tape recorder hummed softly as I played back her statement for the third time that night. Outside my window, snowflakes drifted lazily through the cone of light from the street lamp. My coffee had gone cold, but I hardly noticed. We spoke for maybe 15 minutes. He asked about the neighborhood local restaurants. Nothing unusual, but something felt off. I couldn't place it then. The photograph spread before me confirmed what Alina had discovered the next morning. The immaculate blanket of snow surrounding her home bore no footprints leading to or from her front door. None at all, as if her visitor had materialized on her porch and vanished the same way. I called Mary Peterson that morning. Alina's voice continued from the recorder. She said they hadn't sold their house. No one named David Cooper had moved into the neighborhood. I ran my fingers along the edge of the case file. Alina wasn't the only one. 3 other residents of Oakwood Hills reported similar encounters over the next week. Each description matched: tall, well-dressed man with a disarming smile. Each time he appeared during snowfall. Each time he left no tracks. The thermometer outside my window read 12 degrees. Too cold to be sitting here without turning up the heat, but I barely registered the chill. My mind was caught in the gentle undertow of this impossible case. I lifted a photograph from the file, a security camera still from the convenience store 2 blocks from Alina's home. The timestamp showed 5:43 p.m. on December 12th. A man in a charcoal coat, face partially obscured, buying a coffee. The clerk confirmed he'd paid in cash. No credit card trail. He asked about my book collection, Alina had said during our follow-up interview. Her voice on the tape was softer now, thoughtful. He seemed particularly interested in my first editions, asked if I lived alone, if I kept them insured. I pressed my fingertips against my temples. The station was quiet this late. Only the occasional crackle of the dispatcher's radio broke the silence. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing the day's footprints, just as it had erased those of our mysterious visitor. The 3rd visit had been to James Harmon, an elderly widower who lived near the town square. He knew things about me, James had whispered when I interviewed him. Things no stranger should know. Asked about my late wife's jewelry collection. Mentioned the safe behind the painting in my study. I spread out the map of Oakwood Hills, marking each visit with a red pin. No discernible pattern. No connection between the victims except for one thing: each home contained something of value. Alina's rare books, James's wife's jewelry, the Donovan's art collection, Mrs. Winter's antique silver. Yet nothing had been stolen, at least not yet. The clock on my wall ticked softly, nearly midnight. I should go home, but something kept me rooted to my chair. The gentle falling snow outside seemed to whisper answers just beyond my comprehension. I picked up another photograph, this one from a traffic camera half a mile from James Harmon's house. Same man, same coat, walking along an empty sidewalk during a snowfall. And then in the next frame, taken 30 seconds later, an empty sidewalk, as if he'd simply disappeared. The forensics report sat unopened on the corner of my desk. I already knew what it would say. No fingerprints left at any of the homes. No DNA. No evidence that he had ever been there, except for the consistent testimony of 4 unrelated witnesses. "Detective," the voice startled me. Officer Reyes stood in my doorway, coat dusted with fresh snow. "Thought you'd want to know. We just got another call, same description. A woman on Maple Drive, says the man visited her about an hour ago." I stood up, reaching for my coat. Any footprints? Reyes shook his head. None. And get this, her security system recorded the entire conversation. But when she played it back for our officers, there's no one there. Just her talking to an empty space. The chill that ran down my spine had nothing to do with the December cold. At the scene, Carol Bennett sat huddled under a blanket, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Mid-50s, lived alone. Her living room was immaculate, decorated for Christmas with precision that spoke of someone who values order. And there, beside her fireplace, stood a display case containing what appeared to be valuable porcelain figurines. "He knew my name," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Knew I collected these, asked if I'd ever had them appraised." I watched the security footage on her tablet. The camera angle showed most of her living room. Carol entering, sitting down, then animatedly talking to nothing, empty space. But her gestures, her expressions, she was clearly engaging with someone she could see. "Ms. Bennett," I asked gently, "did you notice anything unusual about this man? Anything at all?" She looked up, eyes distant with recollection. "His shadow," she said finally. "It didn't move right, like it was delayed just by a fraction of a second." I made a note, though I wasn't sure what to make of it. What was becoming increasingly clear was that our visitor was selecting his targets with care, casing them, learning about their valuables. Back at the station, I added Carol's location to my map, 5 pins now. I stepped back, studying the pattern that emerged, not random after all, moving methodically through town, one neighborhood at a time. And then it hit me. I ran my finger along the map, tracing what appeared to be a clockwise spiral, starting at the outskirts and working inward. If the pattern held, I could predict where he might appear next. For 3 nights we waited. Officers in plain clothes were stationed in the homes of residents who fit the profile. The snow continued to fall intermittently, covering our town in a silence that felt oppressive now rather than peaceful. On the 4th night, a call came in from Officer Dawson. "He's here," she whispered over the radio, "just knocked on the door." I was there in 10 minutes, approaching silently through the falling snow. Through the living room window, I could see Dawson, dressed in civilian clothes, nodding and smiling at someone seated across from her, someone I couldn't see from my angle. Heart pounding, I moved to the side of the house, peering through the dining room window for a better view, and there he was, exactly as described, tall, well-dressed, charcoal coat, smiling pleasantly as he chatted with what he believed was his next potential victim. I signaled the other officers to move in, but as we approached the front door, the lights in the living room flickered just once, briefly. By the time we entered, Dawson was alone. "He was just here," she insisted, looking shaken. "We were talking and then the lights flickered and he was gone." We searched the entire house, every closet, under every bed, nothing. Outside, the fresh snow remained undisturbed except for our own footprints. The next day, while reviewing Dawson's recording of the conversation, a chill ran through me. Her voice was clear on the tape, but in place of her visitor's responses, there was only static. Not silence, static, like interference on a radio frequency. That evening, the first theft occurred. Eleanor Chambers' rare books were gone. Her door remained locked, her alarm system armed. The snow outside her windows pristine and untouched. Over the next 3 days, 2 more homes were hit. James Harmon's jewelry, the Donovan's art. In each case, the snow outside remained undisturbed. No fingerprints, no evidence. 6 months have passed since then. The thefts stopped as suddenly as they began. The spring thaw came and went, erasing any hope of finding tracks that were never there in the first place. Sometimes on quiet nights like this one, with snow falling softly outside my window, I review the case files again. I study the single clear photograph we have of him, the convenience store security footage. I cross-referenced databases looking for similar cases in other towns. And sometimes I find myself glancing out at the untouched snow on my front lawn, wondering if tonight might be the night he knocks on my door. Because the one thing that keeps me awake isn't the stolen items or the impossible physics of his appearances. It's wondering how he knew which homes to target, how he knew about valuables that weren't visible, weren't advertised, weren't known outside intimate circles. Unless, of course, he'd been invited in long before. The snow falls heavier now, erasing all evidence of passage, and somewhere in Oakwood Hills, a knock sounds on a door, a new neighbor come to introduce himself. And behind him, no footprints in the snow. Story 7. I remember the first time I stepped onto the property at 1428 Willow Creek Road. The air had that peculiar stillness that often precedes winter, carrying the faintest scent of wood smoke from distant chimneys. The sound of gravel crunching beneath my shoes seemed unnaturally loud as I approached what should have been nothing more than a charred foundation. But there it stood, a Victorian mansion, 3 stories of immaculate white clapboard siding with dark green shutters, a wraparound porch, and delicate gingerbread trim along the eaves. Morning sunlight glinted off spotless windows. A light breeze stirred the branches of ancient oak trees that flanked the property, their shadows dancing across the pristine lawn. "This has to be a mistake," muttered Carlos, the foreman of the demolition crew that had called us. His clipboard trembled slightly in his weathered hands. "I swear on my mother's grave, Detective Hayes, 3 days ago this place was a burned-out shell. We were scheduled to clear the remains today." The file in my hands told a simple story. 5 years earlier, the Blackwood mansion had burned to the ground in what was ruled an accidental fire. The elderly owner, Margaret Blackwood, had perished in the blaze. The property had remained in legal limbo until recently, when the city had finally obtained permission to clear the hazardous remains. "Let's take a look inside," I suggested, my voice softer than usual. Something about the house demanded a certain reverence, like speaking in a library or church. The front door opened with a gentle creak, revealing a foyer with gleaming hardwood floors and an elegant staircase spiraling to the upper levels. The smell of lemon polish hung in the air, mixed with something else I couldn't quite identify, something old and faintly sweet, like pressed flowers in an antique book. Carlos refused to enter, remaining on the porch with arms crossed tightly across his chest. My partner, Detective Reyes, followed me inside, her footsteps hesitant. I noticed her hand resting on her service weapon, though there seemed to be no immediate threat. "It's fully furnished," she whispered, nodding toward the living room to our right. She was right. A Victorian settee upholstered in deep burgundy velvet sat before a marble fireplace. Above the mantel hung a large ornate mirror, reflecting our bewildered expressions. Side tables held delicate porcelain figurines, and heavy drapes framed windows that allowed morning light to filter through lace curtains. But it was the photographs that stopped us in our tracks. Framed in ornate silver, arranged meticulously on the walls and surfaces, were photographs of people I recognized. There was Carlos, the demolition foreman, smiling in what appeared to be a formal portrait, though I knew he'd never posed for such a thing. Beside it, a photo of Detective Reyes in a dress I'd never seen her wear. And there, on the central wall, was a portrait of me, seated in an antique chair, looking directly at the camera with an expression of serene confidence I didn't recognize in myself. "This isn't possible," Reyes murmured, her voice barely audible as she moved closer to examine her own image. I pulled out my phone to document the scene, but the screen remained black despite repeated attempts to power it on. Ray's phone similarly failed, the battery apparently drained. We continued our exploration, moving through rooms that should not exist. The dining room featured a table set for dinner, complete with fine china and crystal glasses. The kitchen contained modern appliances that somehow didn't look out of place among the vintage cabinetry. Everything was immaculate, as though waiting for inhabitants who had stepped out momentarily. As we climbed the staircase to the second floor, I noticed something odd about the wood beneath my fingers. The banister felt warm, almost like skin. I pulled my hand away instinctively, but forced myself to continue upward. The second floor contained 4 bedrooms, each decorated in period-appropriate style, but with subtle modern touches. In one room, children's toys brand new were arranged on a handmade quilt. In another, a laptop sat open on an antique desk, its screen dark. "Detective," called Ray's from down the hall. "You need to see this." I found her in what appeared to be the master bedroom, standing before a wall covered in newspaper clippings and photographs connected by red string, exactly like the investigation boards we used at the precinct. The clippings chronicled the history of the property. The original house had been built in 1887 by Augustus Blackwood, a wealthy businessman with interests in lumber and railroads. Subsequent articles detailed generations of Blackwoods living in the house until the fire 5 years ago that claimed Margaret Blackwood, the last of the line. But there were newer clippings as well, ones that couldn't possibly exist. They detailed events that hadn't happened yet. A newspaper dated 3 weeks in the future announced the groundbreaking of a new development on this very property. Another, dated 2 months ahead, reported a series of unexplained disappearances of construction workers. At the center of this disturbing collage was a faded sepia photograph of a woman in Victorian dress, her face stern but her eyes holding something that made me shiver a knowing look, as though she could see across time into this very moment. Beneath the photograph, written in elegant script on yellowed paper, were the words, "The house remembers, the house rebuilds, the house reclaims." A floorboard creaked behind us, and we both turned sharply. The hallway was empty, but I could have sworn I heard the soft rustle of fabric, like a dress brushing against woodwork. "We should call for backup," Ray's suggested, her voice steady despite the circumstances. I nodded in agreement, though something told me additional officers wouldn't change our understanding of what we were witnessing. As we moved toward the stairs, I noticed the quality of light had changed. What had been morning brightness now had the golden hue of late afternoon. We had been inside for less than an hour, yet the day seemed to have advanced significantly. The staircase, which had led us up easily enough, now seemed steeper and somehow longer on the descent. The wood beneath our feet groaned with each step, not the sound of old timber, but something almost vocal, like a sigh or moan. When we finally reached the foyer, the front door was closed, though I was certain we had left it open. Ray's reached for the handle and turned it, but the door remained firmly shut. "It's locked," she said unnecessarily, giving the heavy wood a solid push. I moved to the nearest window, intending to check if Carlos was still outside, but the glass revealed only darkness, as though night had fallen in the minutes it took us to descend the stairs. No street lights, no stars, just an impenetrable blackness that seemed to press against the panes like a living thing. The lights in the house flickered once, twice, and then steadied, casting a warm glow that should have been comforting but somehow increased my sense of unease. The basement, I suggested. Old houses like this often have cellar doors leading outside. Ray's nodded, and we made our way toward the back of the house, finding a door under the stairs that opened onto a set of descending wooden steps. A switch on the wall illuminated a single bulb that cast long shadows into the darkness below. The basement air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and old stone. Unlike the rest of the house, this space was unfinished, with rough brick walls and a dirt floor in some sections. Our flashlight beams cut through the gloom, revealing stacks of old trunks, broken furniture, and shelves lined with dusty mason jars containing unidentifiable contents. In the center of the room stood an old table, its surface scarred and stained. Atop it lay what appeared to be architectural plans, blueprints of the house itself, but with strange notations in the margins written in a spidery hand. Some appeared to be calculations, others resembled symbols from old alchemical texts I'd seen in museum exhibits. "Look at the date," Reyes said, pointing to the corner of one blueprint. The year listed was 2025, next year. A soft click echoed through the basement, and we turned to see the door at the top of the stairs swing shut. The single bulb flickered and went out, leaving us in darkness broken only by our flashlights. And then we heard it, a soft humming, like a woman singing a lullaby, coming from all around us. The temperature dropped suddenly, my breath fogging in the beam of my flashlight. "We need to leave now," I said, moving toward the stairs. As I reached for the banister, my hand brushed against something solid yet yielding. I directed my light upward and found myself looking into the face of Margaret Blackwood, not the elderly woman who had died in the fire, but the younger version from the sepia photograph upstairs. Her eyes held the same knowing look, her lips curved in a gentle smile. "The house remembers," she whispered, her voice like rustling pages. "The house rebuilds, the house reclaims." And then she was gone, leaving only the lingering scent of smoke in the air. The case of 1428 Willow Creek Road remains officially unsolved. The demolition was rescheduled, then canceled when ownership documents surfaced showing the property had been quietly purchased by a holding company registered in another state. Construction never began on the planned development. Carlos resigned from the demolition company and moved away without leaving a forwarding address. Detective Reyes requested a transfer to another division, declining to discuss her reasons. As for me, I drive past the property occasionally. Sometimes I see only the burned ruins that should be there, but other times, especially in that strange light between dusk and full dark, I glimpse white clapboard siding and green shutters, windows glowing with warm invitation. And sometimes, though I tell myself it's just a trick of light and shadow, I see a figure in an upstairs window, watching and waiting for what I dare not imagine. Because the house remembers, the house rebuilds, the house reclaims. Story 8, I still remember the weight of that case file in my hands, heavy manila folder, weathered at the edges from countless fingers leafing through its contents. The overhead fluorescent lights in the precinct hummed softly, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional white that makes even the most ordinary objects appear clinical and cold. Outside, Seattle's perpetual rain tapped gently against the windows, a white noise backdrop to my thoughts as I reviewed the details of what would become the strangest case of my 20-year career. It began, as many unusual cases do, with something that seemed barely worth reporting. A woman named Alina Winters, 42, a linguistics professor at the university, had called a non-emergency line about a possible break-in. No items were stolen, nothing was damaged. The only thing out of place was a porcelain doll that kept moving. I remember thinking it was the kind of call that typically gets filed away and forgotten. Probably the wind, or a forgetful homeowner, or perhaps a practical joke by a neighbor or colleague. But something in Detective Lauren Rivera's initial report caught my attention. Subject appears rational, highly educated, and genuinely disturbed. No history of mental health issues. Reluctant to make the report for fear of ridicule. The rain intensified as I drove to Ms. Winters' craftsman-style home in Ravenna, an older tree-lined neighborhood where houses sit back from the street, partially obscured by mature rhododendrons and towering Douglas firs. The wipers created a hypnotic rhythm that matched my breathing. 1-2, inhale. 1-2, exhale. Ms. Winters opened her door before I had a chance to knock. A tall woman with prematurely silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a cardigan despite the warmth of the early September evening. Her hands trembled slightly as she invited me in, the only outward sign of her distress. "I know how this sounds," she said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "If I were you, I'd think I was experiencing a mental break or playing some kind of elaborate prank. But I assure you, Detective Carson, I am doing neither." The interior of her home was what you might expect from a university professor. Bookshelves lining every wall, a reading chair positioned near a bay window, papers neatly stacked on a writing desk, everything in its place. The space smelled of old books and Earl Grey tea. Nothing felt disturbed or out of order. "Tell me about the doll," I said, pulling out my worn leather notebook. Its familiar texture between my fingers was grounding, reassuring. Ms. Winters led me to her dining room table where a cardboard box sat. Inside, nestled in crumpled newspaper, was a porcelain doll about 15 inches tall. Victorian-era clothing, painted features with glass eyes that caught the light in a way that made them seem to follow you around the room. The kind of antique that some find charming and others find deeply unsettling. "It was left on my doorstep 12 days ago," she explained, carefully keeping her distance from the box. "No note, no packaging beyond this newspaper. I assumed it was delivered to the wrong address, but there was no name or return address." She didn't touch the doll as she continued. "I put it in this box, intending to donate it or dispose of it the next day. I left the box here on this table." The soft ticking of an antique wall clock punctuated the silence between her sentences. The next morning I found the doll in my study, seated on the windowsill. Her voice remained level, academic almost, as if she were delivering a lecture on an obscure linguistic phenomenon rather than describing something impossible. I assumed I must have moved it myself and forgotten, though that would be highly unusual for me. I returned it to the box. She took a sip from a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The following day it was in the kitchen, then my bedroom, then the bathroom. Each time I returned it to this box, and each time it appeared somewhere else by morning. I made notes in my book, the scratch of my pen against paper the only sound beside our breathing, and that ever-present ticking clock. "And you live alone?" I asked, though I'd already reviewed her file. "Yes, no pets, no cleaning service, no regular visitors. The doors and windows have remained locked. I've checked the security system logs. No one has entered or exited except for me." I nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. In my experience, there was always a rational explanation for these things. Always. "May I ask, gesturing to the doll. She nodded, taking an instinctive step back. I lifted the doll carefully, examining it with the detached curiosity I'd cultivated over years of investigating. The clothing was authentic vintage, not a reproduction. The porcelain had the fine crazing that comes with genuine age. The doll was heavy, substantial in my hands. Nothing about it seemed unusual beyond its antique nature and obvious craftsmanship. "Has anything else unusual happened?" I asked, returning the doll to its newspaper nest. Ms. Winters hesitated just long enough for me to notice. "Yes," she finally said. "Yesterday morning I found it sitting at my desk. It was holding something." From her pocket she withdrew a small piece of paper, folded precisely. She handed it to me with evident reluctance. I unfolded it carefully. A single sentence written in blue ink. "I know what you did on Briar Hill Road." "This appears to be your handwriting," I observed, keeping my tone casual. "It is," she confirmed, her voice barely above a whisper now. "That's my handwriting, detective, but I did not write that note." The clock ticked 7 times before she spoke again. "I have never been to Briar Hill Road. I had to look it up. It's near Spokane, on the other side of the state. I've never been to Spokane." I photographed the note and the doll, made arrangements to take both as evidence, promising Ms. Winters that we would investigate thoroughly. She seemed relieved to have the doll removed from her home, though something in her expression suggested she didn't believe this would be the end of it. Back at the precinct, I ran Ms. Winters' name through every database available. Her record was clean, not even a parking ticket. Her academic credentials were impeccable. No history of mental health issues, as the initial report had indicated. Nothing to suggest she was anything other than what she appeared to be, a respected professor troubled by inexplicable events. I turned my attention to Briar Hill Road. It was, as she had said, a rural route outside Spokane. A search of cases connected to that location yielded one result. 20 years earlier, a family of 4 had disappeared from their home there. The Chambers family, parents and 2 children. The case had gone cold almost immediately. No bodies, no evidence of foul play, no witnesses. They had simply vanished, leaving dinner half prepared on the stove and the television playing to an empty room. What troubled me most was that the case had never made national news. It had barely made local news beyond the initial disappearance. There was no reason Ms. Winters should have any connection to or knowledge of Briar Hill Road or the Chambers family. Unless, of course, she did. I kept the doll in an evidence locker overnight, securely locked and sealed. The next morning I found it sitting on my desk, eyes staring blankly at my chair, another note in its porcelain hand. My handwriting this time, words I knew I hadn't written. Ask her about the music box. I've been a detective long enough to know when something defies conventional explanation. But I'm also a methodical investigator who believes that every mystery has a solution rooted in reality, no matter how obscure or unexpected that reality might be. I returned to Ms. Winters' home that afternoon. She didn't seem surprised to see me again. "It moved, didn't it?" she asked quietly as she let me in. I nodded, deciding that transparency was the best approach. "Do you own a music box, Ms. Winters?" The color drained from her face. She led me wordlessly to her study, opened a drawer in her desk, and removed a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. When she opened it, a gentle melody played Beethoven's F.R. Elise. "This belonged to my birth mother," she said softly. I was adopted as an infant. I never knew her. This is the only thing I have of hers." I looked at the bottom of the music box. A small label read, "Chambers Musical Creations, Spokane, WA." "Ms. Winters," I said carefully, "are you familiar with the name Chambers, perhaps in connection with your birth family?" She shook her head slowly, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, not recognition exactly, but the shadow of a buried memory struggling to surface. I've never," she paused, her academic precision with language failing her. "The adoption was closed. I was told my birth mother died in childbirth. I never pursued it further." I showed her the file I had brought with me, the basics of the Chambers' disappearance. As she read, her breathing became shallow, her hands trembling more visibly now. "The daughter," she said finally, "Emily Chambers, she would be my age now." We sat in silence as the implications settled around us like dust. "But I'm a leaner Winters," she insisted, though her voice held a note of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. "I have memories of my childhood with my adoptive parents, school records, a life." I nodded, maintaining my calm exterior while my mind raced through possibilities. Records can be created, memories can be complex. The doll was never seen again after that day, but the investigation it triggered revealed a truth that had been buried for 2 decades. Alina Winters had indeed been born Emily Chambers. She had not disappeared with her family that night on Briar Hill Road. She had been removed from the home just hours before whatever fate befell her parents and brother. The couple who raised her were not traditional adoptive parents, but people connected to whatever had happened that night. They had created a new identity for her, perhaps out of genuine affection, perhaps out of guilt. They had given her a life of stability and education, keeping her separated from a past too terrible to remember. We never did discover exactly what happened to the rest of the Chambers family. That mystery remains unsolved, but sometimes when I pass antique shops with dolls in the window, I find myself thinking about how truth can find its way back into the light, how some secrets refuse to stay buried, even when logic and reason insist they should. The doll that moved itself, the case that moved me, and the woman whose past finally found her, delivered in porcelain and glass, dressed in clothes from another time, bearing messages written in her own hand from a self she had never known existed. Story 9. I still remember the first time I set foot in the Blackwood house. It was a crisp October afternoon, the kind where fallen leaves crunch beneath your shoes and the air smells of wood smoke and approaching winter. The Victorian structure stood at the end of Maple Lane, its weathered facade partially hidden behind overgrown shrubs. As a detective in the small town of Millfield, I'd passed by many times but never had reason to go inside, until that day. The call came in around 2:30 p.m. Agnes Miller, the realtor who'd finally managed to sell the property after it sat vacant for nearly 8 years, had found something during the final walkthrough. Something that made her hands shake as she dialed the station. Her voice trembled when I called her back, but she wouldn't elaborate over the phone. "You need to see it yourself," was all she would say. I parked my unmarked sedan at the curb, notepad tucked into my jacket pocket. The house seemed to absorb the afternoon sunlight rather than reflect it. Its windows, recently cleaned according to Agnes, appeared as dark voids against the faded blue siding. She was waiting on the porch, arms wrapped around herself despite wearing a thick cardigan. "Detective Collins," she nodded, not offering her hand. "They're upstairs, second bedroom on the right." I've been investigating cases for 15 years, but something in her tone made my skin prickle. "The shadows," she whispered, "the ones that shouldn't be there." The front door creaked as we stepped into the foyer. The interior smelled of fresh paint and wood polish, signs of the recent renovation work. Agnes had mentioned the new owners, a young couple from the city, had been thrilled to snag the property for such a reasonable price. They'd spent weekends driving up to paint and repair, planning to move in permanently next month. "Mark and Eliza were here yesterday," Agnes explained as we climbed the stairs. Each step groaned beneath our weight. "They finished painting this bedroom. No one has been inside since they left around 6 in the evening." The room we entered was freshly painted a soft eggshell white, empty except for a drop cloth on the floor and a ladder in the corner. Afternoon light filtered through clean windows. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then Agnes pointed to the wall opposite the windows. Shadows, not the kind cast by furniture or trees outside the window. These were distinct silhouettes on the pristine wall, human figures, frozen in poses that suggested movement. A tall form that appeared to be reaching toward a smaller one. What looked like a child sitting cross-legged in the corner. And most unsettling, near the center, two figures standing side by side, their proportions and postures remarkably similar to what I'd expect from the young couple who'd purchased the house. I approached slowly, the floorboards whispering beneath my feet. The shadows weren't painted on, they seemed embedded in the wall itself, visible from certain angles and then disappearing when viewed differently, like images trapped beneath the surface. "I've sold houses for 23 years, Agnes said quietly behind me. "I've never seen anything like this." I ran my fingers over the wall. The surface was smooth, dry. No moisture damage, no strange substances, just shadows where shadows shouldn't exist. "Did Mark and Eliza mention anything unusual during their renovation work?" I asked, withdrawing my hand. Agnes shook her head. "Just the usual quirks of an old house, odd creaks, cold spots. They thought it had character." I made notes, took photographs, though I doubted they would capture what I was seeing. The shadows seemed to shift subtly when viewed through my phone screen, becoming less distinct, like how a camera never quite captures the depth of a sunset. "Have there been any other incidents in this house? Previous owners reporting anything strange?" Agnes hesitated. "Nothing documented, but this house has never kept owners for long. The Richardsons stayed the longest, almost 3 years before they suddenly moved out. No explanation given." I continued my examination of the room, checking the closet, the electrical outlets, the ceiling. Nothing explained what we were seeing. As the afternoon light began to fade, I noticed something else. New shadows were appearing on the adjacent wall, fainter but unmistakable. A figure that appeared to be taking notes. My own silhouette, somehow captured on the wall I wasn't facing. "I need to speak with the previous owners," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "And I want the historical records for this property." Over the next few weeks, I pieced together the history of the Blackwood house. Built in 1892 by Jonathan Blackwood, a photographer who had experimented with early techniques for capturing images. His obituary mentioned a revolutionary method he was developing before his death, something about preserving shadows permanently. Most dismissed it as the eccentricity of an aging artist. The house changed hands a dozen times over the decades. I tracked down 6 former residents. All described similar experiences, shadows appearing on freshly painted walls, strange silhouettes glimpsed from the corner of the eye, the unsettling sensation of watching themselves move through rooms they just left. Mark and Eliza never moved in. They backed out of the sale after seeing the shadows themselves, forfeiting their deposit rather than spend another day in the house. I couldn't blame them. The case remains officially unsolved. I filed my report with terms like unusual light phenomena and possible photosensitive residue in wall materials, terms that would satisfy my superiors without requiring further action. The house sits empty again, a for sale sign swaying in the front yard. But sometimes, on quiet evenings when I drive past the Blackwood house, I swear I can see silhouettes moving behind the curtainless windows. Figures that pause when I slow down, as if aware they're being observed, and one always in the upstairs bedroom window that raises its hand in a gesture that might be a wave or a warning. I don't stop anymore. I don't take that route when I can avoid it. Because the last time I drove by at dusk, I saw a figure in that window that matched my own outline perfectly, standing still, watching, as if waiting for me to return, as if it had captured something of me during my investigation, some essence that now lives in that house, trapped in layers of paint and plaster, among all the other shadows that shouldn't exist. And sometimes, when I turn quickly in my own home, I catch a glimpse of movement on my walls, a flicker of something that disappears when I look directly at it, something that follows me, patient and persistent, like a shadow without a source. Something that watches and waits and remembers. Story 10. In the attic, beneath a worn blanket, they discovered a porcelain doll with wide, unblinking blue eyes. Sarah and Michael, a young couple drawn to the Victorian house's allure, initially dismissed the doll as just another forgotten relic. However, that night, an unsettling heaviness lingered in the air as they retired to bed. The next morning, the doll was no longer in the attic. It now sat ominously at the foot of their bed. Detective Rachel Winters was summoned on a crisp autumn morning to investigate a chilling scene in the house. The female victim, found in the master bedroom, was posed in a grotesque manner, eyes frozen in terror. Nearby, the male victim appeared to have been attempting to flee. The lack of forced entry or struggle puzzled the detective. As the investigation unfolded, eerie accounts from neighbors surfaced. Whispers of shadows and ghostly laughter added layers of unease to the already perplexing case. Forensic analysis revealed traces of vintage materials associated with antique dolls, hinting at a sinister connection. Digging into the property's history, Detective Winters uncovered a disturbing pattern of mysterious deaths linked to the house. A past resident, a doll maker, was implicated in a tragedy involving his daughter and a doll bearing a striking resemblance to the one found by Sarah and Michael. Old photographs and hidden handprints hinted at a malevolent presence that seemed to transcend time. Family rumors of dark rituals and bound spirits only deepened the mystery. The doll, imbued with a sinister energy, eluded conventional explanations. After a disorienting encounter with the doll, Detective Winters chose to retire prematurely, haunted by the unsolved case. The house changed hands once more, its dark past shrouding its architectural beauty. The attic, now empty save for a neatly folded blanket, held the chilling legacy of the doll that vanished without a trace. Whispers of the doll lingered in the station, a phantom presence in the unsolved cases that continued to baffle the department. Detective Winters, carrying the weight of the enigma, safeguarded a secret photograph, a haunting reminder of the doll maker's sinister creations. The new owners, opting to leave the attic undisturbed, found solace in the silence of the night. Yet, tales of a spectral child's laughter and fleeting shadows behind the attic window persisted, a reminder of the malevolent force that lurked within the walls, waiting to be awakened by those who dared to uncover its secrets. Story 11. In the quiet stillness of the night, a mysterious tale unfolds, shrouded in whispers and shadows. It began with a faint signal, a mere pocket dial lost in the void of static and muffled echoes. The operator, initially dismissive, hesitated as a voice pierced through the obscurity. A woman's urgent whisper sliced through the air, trembling with fear. "He's here." And then a chilling silence descended like a heavy veil. The trail led to an empty house, an ancient relic of time left to decay, its secrets buried beneath layers of dust and neglect. No forced entry marred its facade, no signs of intrusion disrupted the eerie quiet. Yet in the heart of the desolate kitchen, an old phone rested on the counter, its screen casting an ethereal glow in the darkness. The call had been made mere moments ago, a ghostly echo resonating through the empty rooms. Detective Morgan Reed, haunted by the enigmatic whisper, replayed the recording with a sense of unease gnawing at her. The abandoned property bore the mark of the Sullivan family, who had fled after a devastating fire devoured a part of their home. The house stood forgotten, a silent witness to past tragedies. As Morgan delved deeper into the mystery, she uncovered a perplexing truth. The number belonged to Catherine Sullivan, the deceased daughter of the family, a young woman whose life had been tragically cut short in a car accident 3 years prior. The pieces of the puzzle refused to fit, a spectral phone calling out from the void of abandonment. The forensic team scoured the barren house, seeking answers in the silent whispers of the past. Dust-covered surfaces yielded no clues, no fingerprints to trace, no footprints to follow. The phone stood alone, a beacon of the inexplicable, as if it had materialized out of thin air. The recording, a mere 11 seconds of haunting static and desperate words, became the focal point of their investigation. Voice analysis confirmed the chilling truth. The voice matched Catherine's with an unsettling accuracy. The call had transcended time, echoing the moment of her untimely demise down to the minute. Morgan and her partner, Detective Walsh, delved into Catherine's life, unraveling the threads of a dark tapestry woven with deceit and betrayal. Those who knew her were questioned, each revealing a fragment of a sinister truth lurking in the shadows. A breakthrough came in the form of a journal unearthed from Catherine's belongings, a chronicle of her descent into a web of manipulation and fear. The final entry, a chilling premonition of doom, shed light on a dark secret hidden in plain sight. Confronted with damning evidence, Catherine's former boyfriend, Mark Jennings, found himself ensnared in a web of lies and deceit. His alibi crumbled under scrutiny, his facade of innocence shattered by the weight of the truth. The revelation of a buried phone, concealed near the site of Catherine's tragic accident, unveiled a sinister plot orchestrated by Mark. Deleted texts unearthed a tale of betrayal and terror, a harrowing account of a life cut short by malevolent hands. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a chilling portrait of a manipulative killer emerged. Mark's twisted game of deception and manipulation had ensnared not only Catherine, but others who had crossed his path. In a haunting twist of fate, Mark's obsession with maintaining his facade of innocence led him to orchestrate a macabre charade, a ghostly call echoing from the void of the past. But justice, relentless in its pursuit, finally caught up with him. As the courtroom's verdict rang through the air, Catherine's mother clutched the journal to her chest, a bittersweet victory for a life lost too soon. The phone from the abandoned house, a silent witness to the horrors that unfolded, now rests in the confines of the evidence locker, its ghostly echoes a reminder of a voice that refused to be silenced. In the hushed corridors of memory, Catherine's story lingers, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. A tale not of ghosts and phantoms, but of a voice that defied the shadows, a whisper that pierced the veil of darkness, speaking out from beyond the grave. And in the quiet of the night, as the world drifts into slumber, her voice echoes, a gentle lullaby of remembrance and justice served. Story 12, The Nursery's Whisper. She desired to give the nursery a fresh coat of paint before the little one arrived. The walls had worn a soft blue hue, a color that whispered of bygone tales hidden within its layers. As she applied the first strokes of white paint, a secret began to emerge, faint letters, barely discernible at first, then gradually sharpening into clarity. A message etched beneath the surface. Don't let it hear you, her breath hitched in her throat. Stepping back, she noticed something peculiar, tiny handprints imprinted in the fresh paint, positioned too high on the wall for any child to have reached. This discovery within the nursery of the Morgan residence marked the genesis of what would later be known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had acquired the Victorian-style home just months prior, lured by an unbelievably low price. The real estate agent had casually mentioned minor cosmetic issues, conveniently omitting the property's shadowed past. Detective Sarah Klein arrived at the doorstep, notebook clasped in her hand. A woman answered, her pregnant belly a prominent swell beneath her paint-splattered overalls. Dark circles rimmed her eyes, a testament to sleepless nights. The detective observed the woman's trembling hands as she recounted finding the cryptic message and the ghostly handprints. The previous owners vanished abruptly, the woman divulged. The neighbors claimed they departed in the dead of night. No moving truck, just essential items hastily packed into their car. Detective Klein traversed the historic home, her footsteps echoing against aged floorboards. Standing in the nursery, she scrutinized the half-finished wall. The message still lingered beneath where the fresh paint had been abandoned. Adjacent to it, 5 small handprints pressed into the wet paint, positioned at the height of an adult's shoulder. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into records pertaining to the property. The house had changed ownership 8 times in 30 years, a notably high turnover rate. Each family had resided there for less than 2 years. Even more unsettling were the child welfare reports linked to 3 of those families. Children recounting, whispers emanating from the walls, and phantom eyes watching them slumber. The detective delved deeper, unearthing construction records and historical archives. The house had once been the domain of Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow devoid of offspring, who had operated a small orphanage on the premises during the early industrial era. Newspaper clippings referenced 5 children who had vanished from her care. Authorities at the time had presumed they had absconded, a common fate for orphans of that era. Upon Eleanor's demise, workers renovating the house had stumbled upon a sealed chamber behind the nursery wall. Inside, they uncovered remnants of children's existence, tiny shoes, playthings, and garments, but no mortal remains. The mystery had stagnated, relegated to dusty archives. Detective Klein interviewed former inhabitants, piecing together a chilling narrative. Each family with children had reported eerie incidents, playthings mysteriously rearranged overnight, childish laughter reverberating through empty corridors, and crayon drawings materializing on walls. Most had dismissed these occurrences as figments of imagination until the writing surfaced. The message varied slightly in each account. Don't let them find you. Don't make a sound. Don't let it hear you. Yet the handwriting remained consistent, surfacing only during nursery repaints. A forensic linguist analyzed snapshots of the writing and concluded it matched Eleanor Blackwood's journal entries. More disturbing were the handprints uniform in size and placement over decades, despite different children inhabiting the home. The investigation took a macabre turn when the detective persuaded the current owners to permit ground-penetrating radar in the basement. The technician identified anomalies in the readings: 5 distinct shapes beneath the concrete floor, each resembling a child's stature. Workers tore through the concrete, unveiling a grisly revelation: 5 sets of diminutive remains arranged in a circular formation. Forensic analysis revealed that the children had perished during Aliner's tenure in the house. Each child bore a pendant engraved with their name, the 5 orphans who had allegedly fled. The detective ordered the nursery to be doused in luminol. In the obscurity, handprints glowed on every wall, concealed beneath layers of paint invisible to the naked eye. Hundreds of them at varying heights, as though the children had endeavored to escape. Aliner's journals, salvaged from county archives, unveiled her perverse rationale. She believed orphaned children harbored unique spiritual energy. By confining them in the clandestine chamber, she fancied she could siphon their vitality to prolong her own existence. The children had etched their warnings into the walls with nails and slivers of metal, hoping that future occupants would unearth their tragic fate. The case concluded with the proper interment of the 5 victims. Their names were finally inscribed not as runaways, but as victims of foul play. The house remained desolate thereafter, the expectant couple refusing to re-enter even for their possessions. Detective Klein submitted her final report, enclosing photographs of the luminous handprints and the cryptic message beneath the paint. She underscored that while justice had been dispensed for the original victims, an inexplicable presence lingered in that house, something that transcended layers of paint and epochs. The nursery walls were raised during renovation, yet laborers reported hearing ghostly whispers emanating from the debris. Each worker declined to return after their shift concluded. The house was eventually condemned, relegated to a cold case file in a dusty archive, a tangible testament to closure, yet spiritual enigmas that would forever remain unsolved. The detective retained a photograph from the case, 5 luminol handprints aglow in the darkness, a haunting memento that certain transgressions leave indelible imprints that no amount of fresh paint can conceal. Story 13: The Enigmatic House. She entered through the front door, the dust dancing in the still air of the abandoned house. Years of neglect had left the walls peeling and the furniture cloaked in ghostly sheets. Each step she took felt like a frozen moment in time, a surreal journey through a forgotten past. But amidst the eerie stillness, there was a peculiar mystery waiting to unfold. The doors in the house held a strange secret. No matter which one she opened, every path led back to the parlor, a perplexing labyrinth where escape seemed impossible. The only way out was the way she came in. Yet when she turned to retrace her steps, the front door had vanished into thin air, leaving her stranded in a maze of endless corridors. The discovery of Morgan Pierce's lifeless body transformed the once desolate Victorian into a scene of intrigue and tragedy. Detective Sarah Lind stood at the threshold, watching as forensic experts moved through the dim interior like specters in the night. The house had garnered a reputation among the locals, a place where compasses spun aimlessly and whispers of unseen eyes watching lingered in the shadows. Now it held secrets far darker than mere superstitions. The initial examination suggests she's been deceased for approximately 3 days, the medical examiner murmured, his voice barely audible in the oppressive silence. The cause of death appears to be asphyxiation. Morgan was found seated in an antique chair in the parlor, her posture serene as if awaiting an unknown visitor. No signs of struggle, no marks of violence. The scene exuded a haunting tranquility that sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned investigators. "Who discovered the body?" Lind inquired, her gaze fixed on the notes in her hand. "A real estate agent showing the property stumbled upon her," her partner replied. "Initially mistook her for a trespasser until they drew closer." The house had stood empty since the passing of its previous owner, Eleanor Blackwood, years ago. Legal disputes had left it abandoned, a forgotten relic haunted by memories of the past. Morgan Pierce, a young scholar with a passion for unraveling architectural enigmas, had been drawn to the mysterious Victorian in her quest for knowledge. Her disappearance had been reported by a concerned roommate who mentioned Morgan's fixation on the house where wanderers lose their way in her research. As the investigation unfolded, it revealed Morgan's repeated visits to the house in the weeks leading up to her demise. Her journal entries spoke of strange echoes, chilling drafts, and doors that defied logic by leading to different chambers each time they were opened. In her final notes, she alluded to bringing specialized tools to capture the peculiar spatial anomalies she had encountered. Yet these tools were nowhere to be found. The autopsy unveiled an unexpected revelation: traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, a substance linked to shamanic rituals known to induce disorientation and vivid visions. However, the amounts detected were insufficient to be lethal. She wasn't one to indulge in recreational substances, her partner defended during interrogation. Morgan was meticulous in her approach to research. She wouldn't have jeopardized her clarity intentionally. Digital traces recovered from Morgan's phone unveiled cryptic conversations with an unknown correspondent who shared her fascination with the enigmatic house. The exchanges grew increasingly intimate and enigmatic, hinting at a deeper connection to the mysteries lurking within the Victorian walls. The trail led the detectives to Adam Reeves, an expert in architectural history who had engaged in discussions with Morgan regarding the peculiarities of the house. Reeves professed a genuine sorrow at her passing, shedding light on the house's history of optical illusions and deceptive layouts designed to disorient visitors. However, Reeves's alibi placed him miles away at a university symposium during the estimated time of Morgan's demise, casting doubt on his involvement in her death. A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected source: the grandson of Eleanor Blackwood, who divulged a long-guarded family secret. "My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to meet their end in that house," he revealed. "There were others, always discovered in the parlor, always in a state of peaceful repose. The family termed it the claiming." Ancient journals provided by the grandson chronicled a series of deaths attributed to what the family cryptically referred to as the influence. Individuals who spent prolonged periods within the house eventually succumbed to a mysterious force that defied conventional reasoning. A secondary sweep of the property unearthed a concealed chamber behind the parlor hearth. Inside lay Morgan's missing equipment alongside a collection of artifacts from diverse indigenous cultures, arranged in a ritualistic formation. At the heart of the assemblage sat a weathered figurine embodying a deity associated with liminal realms, the thresholds between worlds. Subsequent analysis linked the substances on the artifacts to the alkaloid found in Morgan's system, hinting at a connection to her demise. The case took a chilling turn when forensic examinations of the house uncovered foreign fingerprints on doorknobs, indicating a presence beyond Morgan during her final moments. Weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered lifeless in his residence, mirroring Morgan's posture with the same alkaloid in his system. Clutched in his hand was a key that unlocked the hidden compartment within the Victorian, a key that had no match within his own dwelling. In his final testament, preserved in an email addressed to himself, Reeves inscribed, "The house doesn't confine you physically, it ensnares your perception." Morgan understood the doors lead to the same destination, yet a deceptive force convinces you otherwise. Once the truth dawns upon you, escape becomes feasible, but by then, the allure of the house has consumed you. The case lingered open, catalogued as suspicious fatalities under scrutiny. The Victorian was decreed off-limits, guarded by authorities to deter curious intruders. Yet whispers persisted of spectral lights flickering within its confines on certain moonlit nights, and of visitors who ventured in but never emerged. Some locals whispered that the house claimed those who delved too deeply into its secrets. Others speculated that Morgan and Reeves had unearthed an ancient power that transcended the boundaries of ordinary reality, a force existing within the ethereal spaces between worlds. The truth remained as elusive as an exit in a house where every door led back to the beginning, a puzzle entwined with the shadows of the past, waiting to ensnare the unwary wanderer in its enigmatic embrace. Story 14. The motel stood in silence, its faded facade hinting at stories untold. Guests came and went, seeking only a temporary respite in its worn rooms. One night a traveler arrived, greeted by the weary clerk who handed her the key with a cryptic warning. "Just avoid the last door on the left," he murmured, his eyes holding a secret she couldn't decipher. Intrigued, she accepted the key, her curiosity piqued. As darkness cloaked the hallway in a hushed embrace, she wandered towards her room, guided by the flickering lights above. The air grew chilly as she neared the fateful door. The handle sent shivers through her fingertips, and as she listened closely, a faint breath whispered from the other side. The door appeared ordinary, yet behind it lurked a presence she couldn't ignore. Detective Morgan Reed stepped into the scene, the yellow tape a barrier between her and the unknown. The room exhaled a metallic tang, a scent of blood that painted the air. Amidst the pristine bathroom and untouched bed, a young woman lay motionless on the floor, her gaze fixed on eternity. Reed knelt beside her, absorbing the silent tragedy that befell another victim. The forensic technician's voice echoed with detached solemnity, detailing the grim familiarity of the crime. Reed absorbed the details, piecing together a puzzle of violence and intention. The victim's elegance clashed with the squalor of the setting, a stark reminder of the darkness that crept unnoticed in forgotten corners. Back at the station, Reed delved into the case, each photograph on the board a testament to lives cut short. The pattern emerged, a thread connecting the victims in a web of tragedy. The press buzzed with speculation, the community gripped by fear of a predator lurking in plain sight. Autopsy results revealed the methodical cruelty of the killer, leaving Reed to unravel the twisted motives behind the facade of normalcy. Days blurred into nights as the investigation deepened, revealing secrets that lurked beneath the surface of ordinary lives. A breakthrough came in a whispered confession, a hint of a forbidden affair that led Reed down a path of deceit and betrayal. Charles Emerson's polished exterior cracked under the weight of evidence, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. In the courtroom, justice cast its unforgiving gaze on Emerson, his mask of indifference failing to shield the emptiness within. Reed watched as the truth unfolded, a chapter closed but never truly forgotten. The door on the left case echoed through time, a cautionary tale of the darkness that dwells within the shadows. And as Reed walked down hotel corridors, the ghosts of the past whispered their secrets, reminding her that some doors once opened reveal a darkness that can never be erased. In the evidence locker, the keys to forgotten rooms lay still, silent witnesses to the horrors that lurked behind the last door on the left. Story 15. The tale began innocently enough, with Michael and Sarah Klein stepping into their new Victorian-era house with visions of peaceful days ahead. The old residence exuded charm, its high ceilings and ornate woodwork whispering stories of a bygone era. Little did they know, the walls held secrets waiting to be unveiled. It all started with a simple water stain in the master bedroom, a yellowish blemish seeping through the floral wallpaper. As they peeled back the layers, a name emerged: Alina Winters, written repeatedly in a frantic, uneven script. Who was she, and why was her name etched into the wall? Their curiosity led them down a winding path of mystery. Online searches revealed a missing persons case from decades past, with Alina's haunting eyes bearing an uncanny resemblance to the previous owner, Margaret Cavendish. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, connecting the present to a chilling past. Night after night, Michael and Sarah delved into the shadows of history, unraveling the threads that tied Alina to their home. The renovation paused as they became consumed by the need for answers, reaching out to former residents and tracking down retired detectives. The revelation that followed shook them to their core. Beneath a hidden floorboard lay a trove of identities, each one a variation of the same face: Alina's face, Margaret's face, and more. The truth emerged like a specter from the shadows, weaving a tale of fractured minds and stolen identities. Forensic teams descended upon their property, unearthing long-buried secrets that pointed to a disturbed soul living within the walls. DNA matched, fingerprints revealed, the truth was laid bare. It was Rebecca Eldridge, a patient with a shattered psyche, who had taken on Alina's persona to the point of murder. As the investigation unfolded, the walls themselves seemed to whisper of the horrors that had unfolded within their midst. The name Alina Winters, etched into every inch, became a testament to a fractured mind desperately clinging to reality. And so, as the sun set on their once idyllic home, Michael and Sarah watched in silence as the final chapter of a dark saga played out before them. Justice, though delayed, finally came for Alina Winters, while their dream house transformed into a haunting reminder of the secrets that dwell within the walls. The house where the past bled into the present, where identities merged and fractured, became a footnote in the annals of true crime, a place where the echoes of a tragic tale lingered in the stillness of the night, inviting whispers of a story long forgotten. Story 16, The Forgotten Box, lay hidden beneath layers of clutter in the attic, a time-worn relic left behind by the house's previous occupants. Among its contents were faded Polaroids capturing ordinary moments of joy and togetherness: birthdays, family gatherings, snapshots of a life once lived. But as she sifted through the images, her gaze was drawn to one photo in particular, the final piece in the puzzle. It depicted her own living room, familiar yet unsettlingly different, occupied by a family she did not recognize. And there, lurking in the shadows behind them, a figure stood watching, a silent observer from a past unknown. Rebecca felt a shiver run down her spine as she studied the photograph, her fingers trembling ever so slightly as she held it. The family in the picture smiling, oblivious to the danger that loomed just beyond their joyous facade, seemed frozen in time, trapped in a moment of blissful ignorance. Descending the creaking wooden stairs, she carried the photo to the harsh light of the kitchen, where the stark reality of the uncanny resemblance between her home and these strangers' dwelling became undeniable. Enter Detective Morgan, a seasoned investigator with a weathered leather jacket and eyes that missed nothing. With a methodical air, he examined the photo, probing for clues that might unravel the mystery at hand. Questions lingered in the air as he inquired about the previous owners, the Nelsons, and their abrupt departure, leaving behind a trail of unanswered queries. The investigation unfolded quietly, tracing back through the history of the house's occupants, each family vanishing without a trace after exactly 1 year of residence. The enigmatic Sutherlands, the missing link in a chain of disappearances, led the detectives down a dark path of secrets buried beneath the foundation of the house. Forensic analysis shed light on the eerie Polaroid, revealing hidden details of the spectral figure in the hallway, a tall, shadowy presence that defied explanation. As the past unraveled, a chilling pattern emerged, linking the enigmatic figure to the house's dark history and the architect Samuel Whitfield, whose mysterious demise cast a shadow over the property. Beneath the concrete floor of the basement, a macabre discovery awaited the preserved remains of the missing families, frozen in time like relics of a forgotten era. Among their possessions lay a camera, a sinister tool that had captured the innocence of unsuspecting families before their untimely disappearance. As the investigation deepened, a hidden crawlspace in the attic revealed a chilling truth, a journal filled with meticulous observations, a sinister plan unfolding with each passing day. Rebecca, now a pawn in a deadly game, sought refuge under police protection, haunted by the ominous presence that lurked in the shadows. The house, once a haven of secrets, now stood empty, its windows dark as the night closed in on its silent walls. The mystery of Samuel Whitfield, a specter from the past, remained unsolved, his legacy shrouded in darkness and deceit. And in the stillness of the night, a Polaroid camera whirred to life, capturing new faces, new homes, new victims in its unending cycle of terror. The truth lay buried beneath the layers of time, waiting to be unearthed by those brave enough to seek it. But beware, for the watchers in the shadows never sleep, their gaze fixed on those who dare to unravel the mysteries of the man in the photograph. Story 17. In the quiet hush of dawn, a mysterious package appeared on Sarah Miller's doorstep. No return label, no tracking number, just a damp cardboard box. Her name was right, but the name on the package was not hers. Ignoring it would have been wise, leaving it untouched on the porch the safer choice. But curiosity, that insatiable itch, won over caution. With gentle hands, she peeled back the tape, anticipating a mundane discovery, books, perhaps, or clothes neatly folded. Instead, nestled within was a single VHS tape, accompanied by a sticky note that simply read, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic tape, a weightiness about it that felt ominous, as if it carried secrets too heavy for its form. Her fingers traced the edges, feeling the grooves and imperfections etched into the plastic. The note, bearing urgent pen strokes, spoke of a message meant for her eyes only. Outside, the world went on with its ordinary rhythm, a distant dog's bark, the laughter of children, the drone of a lawnmower, unaware of the enigma that had landed on Sarah's doorstep. Bringing the package inside, doubt crept into her mind. The name Daniel Whitaker, unknown to her despite years in the same house. The previous occupants, the Johnsons, had never received mail for a Daniel. Curiosity warred with unease as she eyed her old VCR, a nostalgic relic gathering dust. There was something about the tape, a magnetic pull of mystery veiled in worn black plastic. Against rational judgment, Sarah inserted the tape. Static crackled, gradually sharpening into focus to reveal a dimly lit room, a man seated in a chair, his features initially shrouded in shadow. "My name is Daniel Whitaker," his voice, quiet yet resolute, filled the room. "If you're watching this, someone has found you, and they will find me too." As the tape unfolded, Daniel's tale unraveled a haunting account of innocence framed, of a life upended by a murder he did not commit. Detective Eliza Ramirez, wrestling with the case, found herself entangled in a web of deceit woven by powerful forces. The Walsh case, once clear-cut, now mired in shadows and half-truths. The investigation took a turn as Ramirez uncovered Catherine Walsh's crusade against PharmaCorp, a pharmaceutical giant concealing dangerous truths. The pieces began to align, revealing a sinister plot to silence a whistleblower, to fabricate guilt and erase innocence. Sarah received a second package, a trove of damning evidence that unraveled the conspiracy thread by thread. With Ramirez's guidance, they decoded Whitaker's breadcrumb trail, exposing the machinations of those who sought to bury the truth. In a nondescript storage unit, the final pieces fell into place: Whitaker's journal, Catherine's files, and the damning proof of a meticulously orchestrated frame-up. Justice, elusive yet inevitable, arrived not with a bang, but with the quiet certainty of truth unveiled. Sarah and Whitaker, two souls linked by chance, stood at the crossroads of justice and deception. As the tape was returned, a silent understanding passed between them: the wrong address, the chance encounter, all threads converging in a tapestry of redemption. The VHS tapes, symbols of a journey through darkness, now lay in evidence, a testament to the power of truth, to the courage of those who dare to seek it. In the stillness of the night, whispers of justice echoed, lulling the world to sleep with the promise that even in the darkest of shadows, light will find its way. Story 18. In the quiet of a suburban neighborhood, a mysterious key arrived in the mail, wrapped in a plain envelope devoid of any return address. The brass key, aged and worn, held a sense of familiarity that puzzled the homeowner, Sarah Miller. Despite her efforts to unlock every door in her possession, the key refused to turn. Perplexed, she placed it on her coffee table, only to witness the old grandfather clock in the hallway emit a solitary, haunting chime despite its years of silence due to disrepair. Sarah, unsettled by the strange occurrence, reported it to the authorities, setting off a chain of events that would unravel into a disturbing criminal investigation. The responding officer, initially dismissive, took the key as a mere formality, unaware of the dark path it would lead them down. Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator with a knack for unraveling complex cases, found himself with the enigmatic brass key on his desk. Though unassuming, the key exuded an ominous aura, hinting at a sinister mystery waiting to be uncovered. Background checks on Sarah revealed no red flags. She was a retired teacher with a clean record and no apparent connections to criminal activities. Forensic analysis of the key yielded only Sarah's fingerprints, and the envelope contained no clues except for a generic postmark. But it was the key's unique bitting pattern that would crack open the case. A cold case from years past revealed an identical pattern linked to a storage unit where gruesome evidence of unsolved crimes had been discovered, a chilling connection to the present. As Detective Harmon delved deeper into the investigation, he uncovered a web of deceit and horror surrounding a man named Harold Jenkins, a former neighbor of Sarah's with a dark past. Jenkins, a reclusive figure with a history of unexplained gaps in his employment and frequent relocations, seemed to have left a trail of sinister secrets in his wake. The search for Jenkins led to a macabre discovery, a hidden room beneath the floorboards of a cabin, filled with meticulously labeled brass keys, each representing a victim of unspeakable crimes. The horror intensified as forensic teams unearthed human remains buried behind the cabin, revealing the extent of Jenkins' atrocities. As the manhunt for Jenkins escalated, the community grappled with the realization that a predator had lurked among them, unnoticed and unchecked. The press dubbed him the Keymaster, a name that struck fear into the hearts of all who heard it. The hunt for Jenkins culminated in a dramatic showdown, culminating in his tragic demise. His journal, found at the scene, contained chilling confessions and a final message addressed to Sarah, a haunting reminder of the darkness that had touched her life. The investigation ultimately uncovered 32 victims, bringing closure to families who had long awaited answers. Sarah, forever changed by the ordeal, never returned to her home, haunted by the knowledge of how close she had come to unimaginable evil. The grandfather clock, once a symbol of normalcy, was revealed to have been a tool of surveillance, a stark reminder of how predators can hide in plain sight. The case stands as a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity and the importance of remaining vigilant against the darkness that may lurk just beyond the facade of everyday life. Story 19. The old library faced its fate of demolition, the workers nearing completion of their task when a serendipitous stumble revealed a concealed latch nestled within a bookshelf. With a gentle click, the entire structure swung open, unveiling a narrow passageway that led to a hidden chamber. The air within was heavy, untouched by human hands for decades. Devoid of furniture, save for a solitary chair bolted to the floor, the room exuded an eerie stillness. And etched repeatedly on the wall, a haunting message echoed, "I am still here." The construction foreman swiftly contacted the authorities, setting in motion a chain of events that would unravel a mystery darker than anyone could have anticipated. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, found himself confronted with a scene unlike any he had encountered before. Standing at the threshold, his flashlight pierced the shadows, casting a stark light on the chilling words that adorned the walls. "Secure the scene," Walsh commanded the officers, his voice resonating in the confined space. "No one disturbs a thing until forensics arrives." The history of the building added a layer of intrigue to the unfolding narrative. The library had once belonged to the esteemed Harrington family, who had generously bequeathed the structure to the public following the mysterious disappearance of their daughter, Rebecca. Vanishing during her final year of college, leaving behind no trace except her abandoned car near the woods, Rebecca's case had long remained a cold enigma. Despite extensive searches and investigations, the truth of her fate eluded all but her grieving family, who staunchly rejected the notion of her voluntary departure. As forensic experts meticulously combed through the hidden chamber, they unearthed hair and fiber samples embedded in the aged chair. The scratches on the walls harbored minute traces of blood and skin cells beneath layers of dust, hinting at a tumultuous struggle endured by an unseen captive. The chair was clearly intended for restraint, the forensic analyst remarked, gesturing towards the weathered leather straps and bolt holes. Whoever was held here fought fiercely against their confinement. Walsh, sensing the tendrils of a sinister past entwining with the present, delved deeper into the Harrington family's lineage. The timing of the library's donation after Rebecca's disappearance struck a dissonant chord in his investigative instincts. hinting at a connection that begged exploration. Further digging unearthed a disturbing revelation: the contractor responsible for the bookshelf's installation had close ties to Maxwell Harrington, Rebecca's uncle and the patriarch of the family. Financial records hinted at clandestine dealings that far exceeded standard renovation expenses, shrouded in a veil of secrecy. Former library staff, interviewed in the wake of the discovery, expressed shock at the hidden room's existence. None had been privy to its presence, save for an elderly librarian who recalled Maxwell's peculiar attachment to that secluded section of the building. His insistence on preserving the area untouched during renovations had raised no suspicions at the time, dismissed as a quirk of a dedicated bibliophile. The turning point arrived when DNA analysis conclusively linked the biological remnants from the hidden room to samples derived from Rebecca's personal effects. The grim reality emerged: Rebecca had not fled, but had been imprisoned behind the very bookshelf that concealed her secret tomb, possibly by a member of her own kin. Armed with a warrant, detectives combed through the Harrington estate, unearthing a leather-bound journal hidden within a concealed compartment of Maxwell's study. The journal chronicled a disturbing obsession with his niece, culminating in a chilling entry that laid bare his malevolent intentions. "She threatened to expose everything. I could not allow that," Maxwell confessed, his voice devoid of remorse. "The room was meant to confine her until she understood." The dark truth emerged with stark clarity: Rebecca's visit to the library had been a fatal trap, orchestrated by her own uncle. In a moment of desperation, she had attempted to break free, sealing her tragic fate at the hands of a man consumed by greed and malice. Maxwell's calculated confession unveiled a harrowing tale of betrayal and murder, painting a portrait of a family torn asunder by secrets buried beneath the floorboards of a hidden chamber. As excavations revealed Rebecca's skeletal remains, clad in the silver bracelet gifted to her on her 20th birthday, the Harrington family bore witness to the reckoning long overdue. The library, once slated for destruction, now stood as a somber monument to a life extinguished too soon. Community members, moved by the tragedy that had lurked in their midst, adorned the entrance with flowers, a silent tribute to a soul lost to darkness. In a cruel twist of fate, it was Rebecca's enduring plea, "I am still here," etched into the walls with fading hope, that ensured her memory would endure, casting a long shadow over the legacy of those who had consigned her to oblivion. And as justice finally found its mark, the truth emerged from the shadows, a bittersweet vindication for a soul denied peace for far too long. Story 20. The new residents saw it as an oddity: the crackling of the old intercom late at night, a relic of the past, revamped but abandoned in memory. Then one evening the husband pressed the button on a whim. A whisper crackled through the speaker. "Why have you returned?" Startled, he recoiled, hands trembling. His wife, standing close, murmured, "I never uttered those words." The Victorian manor sat serenely amidst ancient oak trees, its aged facade concealing a modernized interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker had acquired the estate at a surprisingly low cost, despite the agent's uneasy demeanor during the tour. The intercom system, a vintage charm connecting all rooms, had captivated the history-loving couple. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the property, gravel under her tires as she pulled up in her unmarked car. The call had hinted at a possible break-in, but a depth in the dispatcher's voice hinted at a more intricate tale. Daniel Parker, tall and pale, met her at the door, his unease palpable even in the dim light. "It all began with the intercom," he explained, guiding Detective Reeves through the grand entrance. "Just static at first, then whispers, then coherent sentences. My wife thought I was imagining things until she heard it too." In the living room, Meredith sat stiffly on an antique sofa, hands clutching an untouched steaming mug. "We discovered something hidden behind the wall," she stated abruptly. Daniel wanted to expand the pantry, and when he tore down the wall, her voice faltered. Concealed behind the wall, wrapped in decaying plastic, lay a small leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves donned gloves before delicately unveiling its fragile pages. The script, elegant yet frantic, belonged to Alina, the apparent former owner. The entries chronicled her growing apprehension that her husband Vincent intended her harm. "The last entry was 30 years old," Daniel elaborated. After that, silence. The previous owners mentioned purchasing it from an elderly man who moved to a retirement community. Further investigation revealed that Vincent and Alina Blackwood had indeed owned the house. Records indicated Vincent sold the house soon after Alina supposedly departed. No divorce papers existed, no change of address, no financial activity in Alina's name post the final journal entry. Detective Reeves mobilized a team to thoroughly inspect the property. Ground-penetrating radar unveiled anomalies beneath the shed's concrete foundation. As investigators breached the aged concrete, the truth emerged in the form of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the skeleton belonged to a woman in her 40s, evidencing blunt force trauma to the skull. A gold wedding band found among the remains bore an inscription, "To Alina, my eternal love." The case against Vincent Blackwood swiftly solidified. Now elderly and residing in a care facility, he comprehended the charges brought against him. Confronted with the evidence, his response sent chills down the detective's spine. "She wouldn't cease talking," Vincent uttered, his tone unnervingly composed. "Always prattling through that cursed intercom, monitoring me, interrogating me. I disconnected it, but she rewired it herself. Claimed she needed to always reach me wherever I roamed in the house." His vacant gaze lifted. "I just desired peace and quiet." In his confession, Vincent disclosed his meticulous fabrication of Alina abandoning him, even sending neighbors postcards from fabricated locations, scripted in forged handwriting. He had dwelled in the house for years, stepping daily above the concrete concealing his wife's remains. The trial was concise, Vincent pleading guilty to murder. The judge noted the calculated nature of the crime and the decades-long deceit that ensued. Daniel and Meredith eventually sold the house, unable to reside there after learning its grim past. Before departing, they held a memorial for Alina in the now-restored garden. The intercom system was removed during renovations by the subsequent owners. Workers recounted hearing static and whispers during the extraction, attributing it to their tools' interference. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file before archiving it. As she closed the folder, she ruminated on how the house had seemingly transcended time to unveil its secret. Justice had finally caught up with Vincent Blackwood, all because Alina had discovered a way to make her voice heard. Among local law enforcers, the case became known as the House That Responded. Detective Reeves occasionally drove past the property on her way home. She never halted, but she would slow down, window cracked open slightly, attuned to whispers carried by the wind. Story 21. The worn envelope, aged and yellowed, bore a fresh stamp, as if time itself had stood still for this delivery. The detective, with steady hands, unfolded its contents, a single sheet of paper, holding a message typed hastily in an uneven, urgent script. "I am sorry for what I did." The paper felt damp, a hint of metallic scent lingering in the air. A faint reddish smear along the edge caught their attention, not ink, but something far more chilling. Detective Sarah Morgan, her touch careful and precise in her protective gloves, placed the letter into an evidence bag. The forensics team confirmed her suspicions the stain was human blood, a match to DNA from an old, unsolved case that had plagued the department for years. The victim, Rebecca Warren, a young journalist, had been found with grievous stab wounds in her apartment. Her laptop missing, her notes scattered, hinting at a story that may have led to her tragic end. Despite exhaustive efforts, the case had gone cold until this letter arrived, simply addressed to Homicide Division. The sender left few traces, only faint smudges hinting at gloved hands. The postmark, a beacon of hope after months of darkness, pointed towards a new light. In the dimly lit briefing room, Morgan gathered her team amidst a sea of photos, timelines, and profiles that had led nowhere. Pinning the letter at the heart of the board, she proclaimed, "This changes everything." Our killer feels remorse. Detective James Chen, her steadfast partner, eyed the letter thoughtfully. "Or wants us to believe so," he countered, wary of the theatrics. The unique typewriter impression patterns led the team on a hunt for a relic long forgotten by time. As they delved deeper into Rebecca's life, her relentless pursuit of truth unraveled. Her last investigation delved into a wealthy family entangled in political webs. The patriarch's recent passing had stirred a hornet's nest of greed and betrayal among his heirs. Interviews with Rebecca's boyfriend, Michael Barnes, unveiled a shadow of fear in his eyes, a tremble in his voice. She spoke of being followed, he confessed, a whisper of regret in his tone. "I brushed it off as paranoia. I should have listened." As the team probed deeper, another letter arrived, bearing the same eerie marks of blood and secrets. The message unveiled more truths. She delved too deep into the family's secrets. The inheritance, the old man's demise, it was never meant to escalate. The trail led to the mansion of the deceased patriarch, where the eldest son, Richard, stood as a master puppeteer, hiding behind a facade of antiquities. Fibers on the envelopes traced back to the youngest daughter, Eleanor, revealing a web of deceit spun within the family's walls. A hidden chamber in Richard's home unveiled a chilling tableau of obsession with Rebecca, cementing his guilt. The revelation of financial ties between Richard and Michael shattered the facade of innocence. Michael's confession tore down the final veil. "I unwittingly led her to her demise." Richard's machinations turned deadly. Eleanor's recording, a damning testament, sealed Richard's fate. As the trial unfolded, the weight of guilt bore down on the accused, his protestations of innocence drowned out by the echoes of his own words. The jury's swift verdict resonated through the courtroom, a final reckoning for the orchestrator of a tragedy. Detective Morgan, a silent guardian of justice, offered solace to Rebecca's grieving parents, a bittersweet closure in the face of irreparable loss. The blood-stained letters, haunting relics of a shattered life, stood as a testament to the fragility of deception and the inexorable pull of truth. The case of Rebecca Warren, a cautionary tale etched in the annals of investigation, whispered a reminder that even the most elaborate schemes crumble in the wake of a guilty conscience. Story 22. In the quiet solitude of a stormy night, she found herself reluctantly ascending the creaking stairs to the attic, compelled by the urgent need to investigate a leak in the roof. The attic, a realm of forgotten relics veiled in dust and cobwebs, held secrets she never wished to uncover. Amidst the shadows, nestled in the farthest corner, rested an ancient dollhouse, a miniature replica of eerie realism. Its tiny furniture arranged with meticulous care, as if frozen in time. But as she peered into the tiny rooms, a chill ran down her spine. The figures within were not lifeless dolls, but tiny, intricately carved replicas of her own family, each miniature likeness positioned precisely as they sat in the rooms below, except for one glaring anomaly. The figure meant to represent her was not seated, but standing by the attic door, a silent sentinel in the miniature world. Rebecca Morgan, her pulse quickening, traced her finger along the dollhouse roof, feeling the imprint where the tiny wooden figure stood. A wave of unease washed over her, unrelated to the cold draft whispering through the attic rafters. This dollhouse did not belong here. It was a stranger in this unfamiliar place, a rental property where the family had recently taken up residence. The unsettling discovery prompted Rebecca to reach out to law enforcement, setting into motion a chain of events that would unravel a chilling mystery. Officers arrived at the suburban home to find a family gripped by fear, huddled in the living room, refusing to return to the attic. Detective Sarah Harmon, the lead investigator, initially brushed off their distress as a prank or the product of an overactive imagination adjusting to a new environment. However, the intricate detail of the miniature figures caught her attention. Each tiny replica captured a distinct feature of the family members: the father's receding hairline, the son's favored hoodie, even the mother's small birthmark. It was as if the miniature world mirrored their reality with uncanny precision. Forensic analysis of the dollhouse revealed fingerprints that did not match any family member. Further examination uncovered microscopic cameras hidden within the eyes of the miniatures, all connected to a sophisticated surveillance system concealed beneath the dollhouse. The movements of the Morgan family, meticulously recorded, revealed a pattern that extended beyond mere observation. The positions of the miniature figures did not just replicate a single evening, but mirrored moments from various days, indicating a prolonged period of surveillance. Detective Harmon realized they were dealing with a level of obsession that defied conventional understanding. The investigation took a chilling turn when a hidden entrance to the basement was uncovered behind a false pantry wall. Inside, evidence pointed to an intruder who had been covertly residing beneath the unsuspecting family for weeks. Food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinted at a presence that had lurked in the shadows, undetected. The absence of forced entry puzzled investigators, as the property had stood vacant for nearly a year before the Morgans moved in. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had passed away, leaving their son to manage the property's affairs. Neighbors offered little insight, except for one elderly woman who recalled glimpses of light in the vacant house. The breakthrough in the case came through digital forensics, tracing the surveillance data to an apartment across town. Inside, a chilling tableau unfolded, a shrine of photographs documenting the lives of the Morgan family and previous occupants, alongside detailed journals chronicling their daily routines with unsettling accuracy. The walls bore witness to a disturbing obsession that transcended mere voyeurism. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, the son of the deceased homeowners, who had spiraled into financial turmoil following his parents' deaths. Rather than relinquishing the family home, he had crafted a hidden sanctuary within, surveilling the unwitting tenants while maintaining his clandestine residence. The dollhouse, a symbol of control and possession, embodied his twisted fixation on the lives unfolding within the walls he once called home. During interrogation, Wells remained unnervingly composed, revealing his warped rationale. The Morgans, inhabiting what he deemed his rightful domain, had become unwitting pawns in his elaborate game of control. The positioned figures in the dollhouse were not a threat, but a testament to his omnipresent gaze, a reminder of his power over their existence. The psychological evaluation painted a portrait of possessive delusion, a distorted reality born out of loss and desperation. As the legal proceedings unfolded, the extent of the violation endured by the Morgan family came to light. The judge, acknowledging the profound breach of privacy and security, delivered a sentence that reflected the gravity of Wells' actions. The case sparked a reevaluation of real estate regulations, highlighting the need for transparency and accountability in property transactions. Yet what lingered in the minds of those involved was the realization that beneath the veneer of normalcy, darker forces could lurk, unseen and insidious. The Morgans, scarred by the ordeal, chose to forge a new path far from the shadows of their former home. Rebecca, haunted by the knowledge of being watched and manipulated, took solace in removing all traces of miniature replicas from their new abode. Yet the specter of intrusion lingered, a ghostly reminder that in the eyes of the observer, they had been reduced to mere playthings in a twisted, miniature world. Martin Wells faced justice for his crimes, but the echoes of his violation continued to reverberate, a cautionary tale of the dangers that may lie hidden behind closed doors, waiting to be unveiled. Story 23. In the quiet of the night, a flicker danced across the baby monitor's screen like a secret message from the shadows. The mother, half dreaming, brushed it off as a glitch, a trick of technology. But then a crackle of static pierced the air, and a voice, soft as a sigh, whispered, "SHHH, go back to sleep." Her world froze in that moment. A chill crept through her veins as she leaped from her bed, heart thundering in her chest. She dashed to her son's room, the dim hallway echoing her frantic steps. But as she flung open the nursery door, her worst fear materialized. The crib lay empty, a void where her baby boy should have been. The room was a silent witness, the window shut tight, the door locked securely. The only anomaly, a plush rabbit, lay discarded on the floor, its obsidian eyes fixed on her like a silent accusation. Rebecca's screams tore through the night, a raw symphony of terror that reached the ears of concerned neighbors. Emergency services rushed to her aid, finding her cradling the stuffed rabbit, lost in a nightmare she couldn't escape. Samuel, the innocent soul at the center of this mystery, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that defied logic and reason. Investigations unfolded, casting shadows of doubt and suspicion over the grieving mother. The absence of clues confounded authorities, leaving them grasping at shadows in a world turned upside down. Whispers of doubt swirled through the community, painting Rebecca as a figure of suspicion in her own tragedy. Her husband, Daniel, absent during the ordeal, returned to a house haunted by uncertainty and fear. The first glimmer of hope emerged in the form of microscopic fibers, tiny threads of truth that hinted at an intruder's clandestine entry. A web of deceit began to unravel, revealing a dark figure moving in the periphery of the night, leaving behind traces of a sinister presence. Daniel, with his hidden secrets and unspoken truths, came under scrutiny as investigators pieced together a chilling puzzle. His hands bore the marks of a hidden life, a life that intertwined with shadows and deception. As the truth unfurled like a twisted vine, the baby monitor stood as a silent sentinel, its digital eyes capturing a truth obscured by lies. Remote intrusions led the investigators to a revelation that shook the foundations of their beliefs. In a dim basement, a woman named Elaine cradled Samuel, a ghost from the past seeking solace in stolen moments. The echoes of a miscarriage long past had driven her to a desperate act, a twisted bid for a happiness denied. Daniel's past, a tapestry of deceit and betrayal, unraveled under the harsh light of truth. His climbing gear, a silent accomplice in a heinous plan, spoke volumes of a darkness lurking beneath the surface. The courtroom held its breath as the baby monitor's voice echoed once more, a haunting melody of betrayal and deceit. The truth, buried beneath layers of deception, found its voice in the whispers of the night. Justice, swift and unyielding, cast its gaze upon the guilty, their fates sealed by the echoes of a stolen innocence. Rebecca, scarred but unbowed, sought solace in a new dawn, leaving behind the shadows of a past that threatened to consume her. Samuel, a beacon of hope in a world tainted by darkness, grew unaware of the shadows that once haunted his existence. The stuffed rabbit, a silent witness to a truth long buried, remained a relic of a night that changed everything. The baby monitor, a conduit for both lies and truth, stood as a testament to the fragility of innocence in a world where darkness lurks in unexpected places. And as the night whispered its lullaby of secrets, a new day dawned, carrying with it the promise of healing and redemption. Story 24. The quaint costume emporium was in its final days, the air heavy with nostalgia as old relics found new homes. Among the fading trinkets, a woman's hand reached out and grasped a mask, its intricate details both enchanting and eerily lifelike. The cashier faltered as she placed it on the counter, murmuring hesitantly, "That's not from our collection." Puzzled, she glanced at the mask. No tag adorned it. With a nonchalant shrug, she decided to take it home with her. When night draped its velvety cloak over the world, she stirred from slumber to a gentle rustle, the whisper of fabric unfurling. The mask was no longer perched on the dresser where she had left it. Instead, it sat upon her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her. This woman, known as Catherine Reed, was later discovered by a concerned neighbor. The creak of her slightly ajar front door beckoned the neighbor inside, sunlight spilling into the dim abode, illuminating a chilling tableau that would perplex investigators for years to come. Catherine lay motionless on her bedroom floor, the mask mysteriously vanished. Detective Morgan arrived on the scene, her presence a shadow amidst the shutter clicks and murmured conversations. "No signs of forced entry," noted one officer, scribbling in his notepad. The detective's keen eyes roved over the room, absorbing every detail. A half-open drawer, a lipstick-stained water glass on the nightstand, mundane elements juxtaposed with the tragedy of a life extinguished. The medical examiner's somber countenance hovered over Catherine's form. Initial examination reveals no clear cause of death, no visible wounds, no evidence of a struggle, he intoned, gesturing towards her terror-stricken expression. The detective knelt beside her, her voice barely a whisper. Something frightened her to her core. Catherine, an unassuming art appraiser, led a life of quiet precision. Colleagues spoke of her discerning eye, her knack for spotting the subtle flaws that betrayed a forgery. She could detect a fake with a single glance, her boss recalled during questioning. The detective mused on whether this acuity had inadvertently led to her untimely demise. Footage from the costume shop revealed a peculiar exchange. The cashier's perplexity at the mask's origin was palpable, prompting a consultation with the owner, whose denial was resolute. The detective's visit to the now vacant shop unraveled a tale of inexplicable phenomena. The owner confessed, "That mask materialized during our clearance sale. Its origins remain a mystery, absent from our inventory." A breakthrough emerged when microscopic fibers were unearthed from Catherine's fingertips. She grasped at something, the lab technician elucidated, peculiar fibers of human hair interwoven with an unidentified organic substance defying classification. The investigation unfurled a tapestry of enigmatic deaths spanning decades, each victim linked by an eerie mask and a visage etched in terror. A retired detective, seasoned in such enigmas, shared a revelation. Seated in a dim-lit chamber, he slid a weathered file across the table, disclosing cryptic symbols hidden within each mask, a scholar's conjecture tying them to a macabre ritual of soul transference. A journal clandestinely stowed behind a loose panel in Catherine's abode unveiled her descent into dread. Her frantic entries chronicled an insidious presence, the mask's malevolent sentience, and its sinister connection to a lineage of tragic demises. The detective pieced together the puzzle, the enigmatic fibers, Catherine's research, and the trail of fear-stricken deaths. The medical examiner's final verdict, a fatal cardiac arrest induced by sheer terror. What specter could evoke such paralyzing dread that a heart ceased its rhythmic cadence? Surveillance footage from a vigilant neighbor's abode disclosed a chilling revelation, the silhouette of a figure exiting Catherine's home, adorned with what seemed to be the mask, moving with her eerie grace yet devoid of human essence. An alert was issued for the missing mask, but its elusive presence persisted until whispers surfaced of its reappearance in a distant vintage shop. By the time investigators arrived, it had already changed hands, the buyer's identity veiled in obscurity. The case lingered in limbo, unsolved, a specter of terror lingering in the shadows. The detective safeguarded Catherine's journal in her desk drawer, a grim testament to a reality beyond official comprehension. Sometimes, in the hush of night, she jolted awake, a sensation of unseen eyes fixated upon her. She secured her sanctuary, a bulwark against the lurking malevolence of a mask poised to ensnare another unwitting soul. The mask endures, a specter of ancient malevolence, biding its time until it finds a new bearer. And when it does, another will awaken to the eerie rustle of its approach, hollow sockets fixated on the essence within, hungering for the essence that dwells behind mortal eyes. Story 25. In the quiet stillness of a forgotten birthday captured on an aged Polaroid, a tale unfolds. Faces frozen in smiles, candles dancing with flickering flames, seemingly ordinary scenes until a curious discovery shatters the tranquility. The daughter, inheriting a box of memories tucked away in the depths of her mother's attic, stumbled upon the anomaly. A figure lurking in the background of each photo, a man cloaked in shadow, standing just beyond the reach of the candle's gentle glow. Unseen and unknown, he intruded upon cherished family moments, drawing closer with each passing snapshot. Sarah Winters, grappling with the weight of loss after her mother's funeral, unearthed the haunting collection labeled simply Memories. What should have been a comforting journey through nostalgia transformed into a descent into darkness. The first photo revealed a faint silhouette at the edge, a mysterious presence lingering during a long-forgotten birthday celebration. Subsequent images unveiled his progression, from a distant observer to a looming specter standing ominously behind her relatives, unnoticed by all but the lens of the camera. With trembling hands, Sarah reached out to her father, seeking answers to the enigma that plagued her. His initial dismissal turned to disbelief as he too beheld the unsettling images. A call to the authorities led her to Detective Marcus Reed, a seasoned investigator who listened intently as she laid bare the unsettling truth before him. Rain tapped rhythmically against the windows of the precinct, casting shadows that mirrored the mystery shrouding the photographs. As the detective pored over the evidence, a chilling realization dawned upon him. The figure in the photos moved with purpose, a silent intruder navigating through the captured moments of joy with sinister intent. Despite exhaustive inquiries, no one could place the man in their memories. The trail of breadcrumbs led nowhere, with each attempt to unmask the phantom yielding only more questions. A breakthrough came with the aid of technology, as digital enhancements unveiled hidden details within the faded images. A scar, a ring, a glimpse of a face previously obscured all fragments of a puzzle that pointed towards a sinister truth. Dental records provided the final piece, linking the shadowy figure to a dark past of unsolved disappearances and heinous crimes. Robert Keller, a maintenance worker with a chilling history, emerged as the elusive figure haunting the family photos. His connection to the vanished children sent shivers down the spines of those involved in the case. The revelation unraveled a web of deceit and horror, exposing a predator who had lurked in plain sight for decades, his presence a ghostly echo of past atrocities. Sarah sat alone, surrounded by the damning evidence that revealed a hidden chapter of terror within her own family history. The news of identified remains near the vacation property brought a sense of closure tinged with sorrow. DNA confirmed the fate of one of the missing children, offering a bittersweet resolution to a mystery that had haunted families for years. Gazing at the final birthday photo, Sarah saw beyond the smiles and flickering candles. The figure, once a specter of shadows, now stood exposed in the harsh light of justice. The box of memories became a vessel of truth, a testament to the unseen dangers that lurk within the confines of captured moments. As she closed the lid, the echoes of the past whispered a solemn warning that even in the warmth of celebration, unseen threats may linger, waiting to emerge from the shadows and rewrite the narrative of innocence. Story 26. Renovations always lead to uncovering mysterious things from the past: old newspapers, forgotten photographs, broken trinkets. But for one couple, Sarah and Michael, the discovery beneath their Victorian-era home was far more chilling. As they lifted the floorboards during their renovation project, a neatly folded letter emerged, its brittle paper revealing a faded message: "Don't trust the one who knocked." Before they could process the eerie warning, 3 sharp knocks reverberated through the empty house, sending shivers down their spines. Intrigued and unsettled, they called upon Detective Alina Reed, whose seasoned hands carefully retrieved the note, already tainted by the couple's touch. Reed delved into the house's complex history, previously owned by the reclusive Hargrove family. The note, dated 2 decades prior, hinted at fear and urgency, leading the detective to unravel a tale of debt, betrayal, and hidden truths. Interviews with acquaintances painted a picture of Franklin Hargrove, a respected teacher turned troubled recluse, haunted by a malevolent collector known as Victor Mercer. Franklin's refusal to pay his debts led to a violent confrontation, resulting in a buried secret and a chilling warning left behind. Forensic analysis and Margaret's haunting diaries pieced together the tragic events that unfolded within the old walls. Mercer's remains were unearthed, finally bringing closure to a long-buried mystery of greed and deception. Sarah and Michael, unable to bear the weight of the house's dark past, sold the property, leaving it abandoned. Whispers still circulate in the town of ghostly knocks in the night, a reminder of the secrets that lie dormant within. Detective Reed concluded her report with a somber truth: some mysteries are destined to remain unsolved, leaving behind a lingering question of trust and treachery. The note, now stored as evidence, serves as a haunting reminder: don't trust the one who knocked. And as the house stands empty, its history echoing through the halls, the true meaning of those 3 ominous knocks remains a mystery, shrouded in the shadows of the past. Story 27. In the quiet stillness of the night, a house stood silent, its windows dark, its walls holding memories long forgotten. For years it had remained vacant, a silent witness to the passing of time. The neighbors whispered tales of a young woman who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a mystery that lingered in the air like a ghostly whisper. When the new tenants arrived, eager to make the empty house their home, they were met with a chilling surprise. The bedroom, sealed shut from within, held secrets that begged to be uncovered. With a sense of trepidation, they forced open the door, revealing a scene frozen in time. The air inside was heavy with the weight of neglect, the scent of dust clinging to every surface. But amidst the stillness, something stirred uneasily. The bed was neatly made, the mirror polished to a gleam, and on the desk a solitary candle had burned down to a mere puddle of wax, its flame long extinguished. But it was the sight of the open notebook that drew their attention, a notebook filled with the elegant script of a young woman named Elise Winters. Her words, penned with precision, told a tale of fear and foreboding, of a darkness that crept ever closer. As Detective Morgan delved into the pages of Elise's journal, a sense of unease settled over the room. The ink seemed to shimmer in the dim light, revealing a story of deception and danger. Elise, a paralegal entangled in a web of corporate intrigue, had uncovered secrets that threatened to consume her. The room held no answers, only more questions that whispered in the shadows. The landlord, a figure of uncertainty in the doorway, could offer no solace, only a sense of disquiet that hung in the air like a shroud. Elise's disappearance, a puzzle wrapped in darkness, hinted at a deeper truth waiting to be unveiled. The room, a silent witness to her final moments, held clues that beckoned to be deciphered. Through the careful work of forensic technicians, hidden truths began to emerge. Fingerprints faded with time, doors wiped clean of any trace. But beneath the surface, a hidden compartment revealed a cache of secrets that would shake the foundations of a prestigious law firm. The revelations within the hidden files painted a picture of greed and deceit, of lives sacrificed for the gain of a few. Elise's voice, captured in clandestine recordings, spoke of a truth that could no longer be silenced. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a shadowy figure emerged from the depths of the past. Vincent Harriman, a man of power and privilege, stood accused of heinous crimes that had long been buried in darkness. The truth, a fragile thread woven through the fabric of lies, unraveled with each passing moment. Harriman's facade crumbled, revealing the darkness that lurked beneath his polished exterior. In a courtroom filled with echoes of the past, justice was served. Harriman's lies could no longer shield him from the weight of his sins. Elise's legacy, a beacon of truth in a world of shadows, shone brightly in the face of corruption. The house, once a sanctuary of secrets, stood empty once more, its walls echoing with the whispers of the past. The light in the upstairs window flickered like a beacon, a reminder of the young woman who had refused to be silenced. And as the night settled over the house, a sense of peace descended, carrying with it the promise of justice fulfilled. The mystery of the locked room, a chapter closed but never forgotten, whispered its secrets to the stars above, a lullaby of truth and redemption.